Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight in 7 terrifying true horror stories from America's most haunted graveyards, we're venturing deep into the resting places where the dead refuse to stay silent. From forgotten Civil War cemeteries to churchyards swallowed by fog, every grave here holds more than bones. It holds memory, grief, and something that still moves after midnight. These are not legends. They are first-hand accounts from caretakers, mourners, and night shift workers who've witnessed impossible things. Footsteps on fresh soil, voices calling from sealed crypts, and shadows that stand where no shadow should be. My goal this month is to reach 3,000 subscribers, and yet, almost 90% of viewers listen and vanish into the dark without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Join the darkness. Subscribe now before we begin. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and what hour of the night it is for you. And if there's a graveyard in your town that everyone avoids after dark, type its name below. Because in these places, where time stops and the earth remembers, some graves never truly sleep. Kill the lights. Silence the world. Take a slow breath, and let us begin. I'm not the kind of person who jumps at shadows. I was a night custodian at St. Louis Cemetery No. 1 in New Orleans for a little over 3 years. And if you work nights in a city of ghosts, you learn that most noises are just wood shifting or cats squeezing through a fence. You also learn that people like to scare themselves. They come to the gate at dusk half drunk and dare each other to peek between the iron bars, and you can see the story forming in their eyes before they've even done anything. But what happened to me last summer isn't a story I wanted. It's something I still hear when my house is quiet and the air gets heavy, the way it does before a thunderstorm. I still hear my name. You probably know the cemetery even if you've never been. The one with the little whitewashed tombs all bunched together like crooked teeth. The one with the famous people and the famous rumors. A maze of above-ground vaults, little alleys of limestone and brick, everything settling into itself after 200 years. Tourists pour in during the day with guides who whisper about yellow fever, voodoo queens, and families too poor to keep their graves patched up. At night it belongs to caretakers and rats, to the sound of interstate tires whispering on the other side of the wall, and to the wind that brings the smell of the river. That's when I worked. I swept the narrow lanes, checked the locks, and turned back the folks who thought a night tour would be better with bolt cutters. I liked the work mostly. It was quiet. You get into a rhythm. I'd arrive at sunset, meet the earlier shift in the little office by the gate, and we'd exchange keys and notes. Sometimes my supervisor, Lionel, would linger and smoke a cigarette with me, leaning on the wall like it could hold up all his opinions. He was older than me by 20 years, with the kind of tired eyes that looked like they'd seen rowing boats on the same water as steamships. There was also Brigitte, who did mornings and always left a thermos of coffee for whoever came in after her. She wrote her notes in neat loops and hearts above the eyes, even when the note was about finding broken bottles hidden behind a tomb. We had a security company that sent a car by at odd hours, but mostly it was on us. It started the way most bad things start. So small I told myself it was nothing. A whisper of my name that looked like a trick made out of wind and memory. It happened on a Tuesday night in July, the kind that sticks to your skin. The tourists had finally thinned after a day of elbowing into the narrow paths, and I was doing my first round with a flashlight, tapping the doors to make sure the locks hadn't rusted in the open position. The cemetery changes with the light. At night it flattens into shapes and familiar corners become strangers. You learn landmarks. The cracked angel missing half a wing near the back wall, the sunken path where water always collects, the iron cross with the one bent arm. That night, moving past a row of crypts near the older section, I heard someone say my name. Mark. I stopped because it wasn't the jump scare shout you get with teenagers. It was quiet and close, like a person standing with their mouth near your ear. I did the math a night worker does. Was it the interstate? A kid on the wall? A member of the security crew trying to mess with me? I swung the beam of my flashlight around in a slow circle that made the plaster glow. Nothing. I walked to the gate and looked down the street where the lights made little smeared halos. No one. I shrugged it off as sound bouncing off stone, logged it in my head as atmospheric, but the sound of my name wasn't the shout of a stranger. It had the weight of someone who knew me. The second night was worse. I had headaches, the kind you get when you've had too much sun, and I blamed it on not drinking enough water. Around 1 in the morning, When the night drops into that deeper quiet and the last of the music from the quarter blurs into a far-off hum, I was near a long family tomb with a magnolia tree leaning over it. The tree drops these hard floral grenades that explode under your boots and you learn not to flinch. I was picking one out of the path when I heard it again. "Mark, please." I stood up fast enough to feel my back pull. I kept the flashlight low and tried to look like I wasn't spooked. You don't want to give the dark that satisfaction. The voice had come from the magnolia shade, from the seam of the family tomb where the door met the frame. It didn't sound like it was on the other side of a door. It sounded like it was inside the stone itself. I put my hand on the hot, gritty surface and tried the lock. It was tight. No fresh scratches, no sign of someone trying to pry their way in. There was a little mesh-covered vent set high on the door for air, the way the old ones did it, and I put my face up to it like an idiot, pressed my ear to the warm metal. I heard nothing but my own breath. I stepped back and said the kind of thing people say to the dark when they're pretending they're not talking to it. "I'm working," I said. "If someone's in there and messing around, I'll get the police." "You don't want that," nothing answered. I told myself I'd just heard my name because I was tired. The magnolia dropped another seed pod. My radio popped with static and I almost jumped out of my skin. It was the security guard on the late-night circuit, asking if I needed anything. I told him all good and made myself walk away at a normal pace. I could have kept writing it off, and maybe that's what this thing needed me to do. The next day I told Brigitte in a casual way, like it was a funny story about the weird things you hear. She tapped her nail on the desk and said she'd heard someone call her name once near the back wall last winter, and had blamed it on a group of teens. "They want to draw you in," she said, half joking, half not. "If you answer, you're in a conversation. And conversations are binding." She grinned to show she didn't mean it and poured me coffee. Lionel came in halfway through and told us to throw away the old sign that warned people about stepping on soft spots. "People don't read signs," he said, and then he looked right at me. "And if something calls your name, don't say a thing. The only thing that answers to your name is you." On the fourth night, the rain came. The cemetery takes rain like a history lesson. You see where the water has always gone, which is to say everywhere. It pools in the lower lanes. It runs like the city can tilt. I wore my cheap poncho and sweat collected underneath it until I felt like I was dissolving. I was checking the far corner near an old vault with a cracked cherub when I caught the voice again. But this time it wasn't a whisper. It was a murmur, like someone had put their mouth to the seam of a door and spoken in a breath that ran out at the end. "Mark, let me out." It didn't even try to sound like a stranger. It sounded like my sister on the night phone when she wants me to come haul a futon up 3 flights. It sounded like a person who had known me for a long time and wasn't embarrassed to ask. I stood there ankle deep in water and said nothing. I moved the flashlight in slow arcs over the names on the tomb. The family name had long turned to a shade between gray and nothing. There was a little plate with generations carved into it. One of the names was Camille, my mom's name, not uncommon in this city, but in that moment I felt everything inside me lean toward the voice. I thought of the way my mom bent over the stove on Red Beans Mondays, the way she called me by my full name when she wanted something, the way her voice got thin when she was sick. I took a step forward without meaning to. My radio hissed again. The security car crackled through with a burst of laughter, and then a different voice, not theirs, slid down inside the static, a whisper crawling through an open window in the frequency. I heard my own name, but not just that. I heard the start of a sentence the way a person reaches for you when their hand is under a door you're holding shut. "Mark, you know me." I dropped the radio like it had bitten me. It picked up some grit and spit mud into the speaker. I scrambled to get it and hit the side and said I was fine, just dropped it, and the guard laughed and told me to get a better grip. When the radio settled, the voice was gone. The rain kept falling. I finished my round, moving a little faster than my pride liked, and when I got back to the office, I wrote down the location of the tomb and the time. I stared at the letters of the family name until they stopped being words. I told myself I'd look up the interment records the next day, but I didn't. IA slept with the TV on because the silence of my apartment had become a place where someone could stand at the foot of my bed and ask me to let them out. After the 5th night, I asked Lionel, but I tried to make it sound like I was asking hypothetically. "Do people ever complain that the tombs sound like they're breathing?" I said. He set down his keys and stared at me for a beat too long. Then he told me a story he'd never included in the training packet. Years back, before my time, there had been a caretaker named Rene who'd worked nights. He was one of those guys who never wore ear protection and who thought music would make the dead less dead. So he played it soft out of a little speaker that clipped to his belt. One night he heard his name called near the back wall and he answered because that's what people do. He said, "Who's there and what do you need?" And he got pulled into a conversation that was all one-sided. He'd stop talking and the voice would fill the break. He kept thinking he could catch it in a lie. The next week he quit. He turned up a year later outside the gate at noon on a hot day, looking gray under his beard, and he asked Lionel a strange question. "When you put a living body into a hot stone room and leave it, how long does it take before the air goes bad?" Lionel didn't know. Renee nodded like that made sense and walked away. They never heard from him again. "That a ghost story for tourists," I said. Lionel didn't smile. "It's a story," he said. "And I said it to you because you asked the kind of question that means you already know the answer." I lasted another week. In that time, the voice changed. I wish I could tell you it stayed one thing that I could fight or ignore, but it didn't. It tried on people the way a con artist tries on jackets. Sometimes it was my mother on a day she felt kind. Sometimes it was my father on a day he didn't. The word Mark carried like a warning. Once it sounded like Brigitte laughing and saying my name in the way she does when she wants me to move a box. Once it sounded like me, which made me feel like something inside the stone was looking through a window at me and making a mouth with my shape. It was clever. It didn't shout. It negotiated. It said, "Please." It said, "It's not what you think." It said, "I'm not like the other ones." It said, "You know me." It said, "You're the only one here at night, and I'm not asking you to do anything big. Just open this door so I can breathe." I didn't open any door. I'm saying that now so you don't get ahead of me. But I came close. I came close because of the little things it knew. It knew my sister had 2 boys and a sugar ant problem. It knew I'd once broken a window at 15 and kept my mouth shut while my father looked for a guilty party. It knew my mom owned a red rosary with a missing bead. It told me about the day my father left the hospital because he couldn't stand the smell, and I took his place in the chair by my mother's bed. It knew this not like a person who had asked around. It knew it like it had been there, and maybe it had. And maybe it had been there longer than I had. I told Brigitte in a whisper one afternoon when our shifts overlapped more than usual. It was raining again, a steady tap that made the office feel like a ship's cabin. She nodded and made the sign of the cross, but the quick, sloppy kind you do when you don't want to show you're doing it. "It wouldn't be the first time," she said. "Names are not nothing. You think you own yours because it's yours, but sometimes it's like a spare key under the mat." "What do?" I asked. "Wait," she said. "Don't answer. Don't look at the door that calls you. Walk past. If you see anything on it, don't touch it. Some folks leave gifts and some leave bait. And if you hear your mother, think about all the times she sounded like your mother and then tell yourself she never sounded like she was behind a brick wall." On the night everything went to hell, the city had that post-storm heat that feels personal. All day lightning had been moving in a slow parade north and the sky kept threatening to do something it never did. I did my first round and moved past the Magnolia tomb without looking. Except, of course, I looked. There was a chalk mark on the stone, a small circle with a line through it. I'd seen tourists make chalk offerings on the famous tombs trying to barter for luck. Usually we wash it off. This one was fresher than the others and smaller, like a child's drawing of the sun. There were tiny scratches near the lock, the kind you get when a key doesn't fit. The voice waited until late. It let me get tired, the way a person working a con waits until your defenses drop. It came from farther down the row this time, from a different family vault. This one patched with a strip of newer plaster near the base where water had eaten away at the seam. I almost walked past it. I almost did what I had promised myself. Then it said a thing that pinned me in place. "Mark," it said, not pleading, not angry. "I can show you where they put her." My mother had been cremated. I knew exactly where her ashes were. I had held the urn and thought about how small a life can get when heat is involved. But the voice didn't say ashes. It said where they put her. And some part of me that still believed in my father's muttered warnings about things that walk at night wanted to believe there was a secret in the stone. I put my hand on the vault. It was sticky with the day's heat. My flashlight picked out the little patches where lichen had been scraped away. I told myself I was only looking. There was nothing wrong with looking. That's the thing about lines. You draw them so you can step on them and tell yourself you haven't crossed. "Tell me," I said it out loud. I heard my voice sound like a man agreeing to something without the details. The answer came so fast it felt like it had been sitting behind my teeth waiting to leap. In the back, it said, where the wall sinks. The ground is soft there. Something was added that was never recorded. You'll see the brick out of place. You'll see the mortar that never matched. You'll feel the air cooler through the vent. My hand was already moving. The path behind the vaults can be treacherous after a storm. The water collects and makes a mirror that lies about depth. I stepped over a puddle and ruined the back of my boot in another one. The back wall is older than the rest and everything near it leans. The rats make tunnels where the earth is safe for them. The place the voice meant was obvious once you looked for it. A spot about the size of a suitcase patched with brick that didn't match. The mortar too clean, as if it had been done in the last decade instead of the last century. There was a vent above it, a little circle of rust like a mouth. I put my palm near the bricks and felt it, the faintest thread of air that seemed cooler than the air on my skin. If you want me to say that logic saved me, that I walked away because I had sense, I can't. What saved me was noise. The back gate rattled. Someone called my name, my actual name, in a tired, annoyed voice that sounded like a person trying to get my attention because a form needed signing. I jumped and turned and lifted my flashlight into Lionel's face. He put up his hand and swore. He told me to stop blinding him and asked why I was stomping around behind the wall. I said nothing that made sense. He listened to my babbling about bricks and vents and my mother, and he looked at the spot with his head tilted like he was trying to decide if I had lost my mind. He put his hand on the brick himself and closed his eyes as if he could hear through his skin. "Go to the office," he said finally. "I'll finish your round. Sit down and have water. Write everything you think you know on a piece of paper and bring it to me in 10 minutes. I went because he'd given me an order in a voice that sounded like roads and hot summer and work. In the office, I sat in the metal chair and drank from the plastic cup and wrote down what the voice had said. The cup sweated. The paper pinched under my wet fingertips. I looked at the clock and told myself that 10 minutes can hold a lot of change. I heard something like a thump from far away and made myself stay seated. When I went back to the spot behind the wall, Lionel was kneeling. He had one hand braced on the brick and the other on the ground like he was listening for a train. He looked up when I came around the corner. His face was wet, but it wasn't sweat. The air around us had cooled in a way that didn't make sense, like someone had opened a door to a different room. He stood up and wiped his hands on his pants and then on his face in a gesture that felt helpless. He told me to stop coming back here at night. He said he would ask the office to switch my schedule. Daylight is a better habit, he said. For a while. Did you hear it? I asked. I heard you, he said. And I heard what you thought you heard. And I heard something else. We're going to plaster over this spot again tomorrow and you won't come near it. Okay, I said okay. I went home and slept poorly, and woke up feeling like the walls of my apartment had been moved a half-inch closer. Next day I called my sister. We talked about her boys and the kind of cereal kids eat like it's a religion. I didn't say a word about the cemetery. I got through the day by telling myself I was overreacting, and that I would apologize to Lionel for being weird, and then go about my life. That night my phone rang just after midnight. It was the security company. They asked if I was on site because the office door was open and the lights were on. I said I wasn't scheduled, and the guy said he knew that, and that he was calling because Lionel's truck was there and his keys were in the lockbox and his radio was on the desk and no one was answering the back gate. I threw on a shirt and drove there in a sweat that wasn't heat and wasn't fear yet, but was the twin of both. When I parked outside the wall, the security guard met me. He looked young enough that late nights still felt like an adventure. We went in together. The office was exactly as he'd said. Lionel's coffee cup stood on the desk like he'd set it down to listen for something, and wouldn't mind if you took a sip. The radio hissed soft with the open channel. We called his name. My throat felt like it was closing. I took the keys and we walked the paths, the flashlight making clear shapes out of the black. Nothing moved that could have been a person. Bats flitted against the sky. Somewhere a long way off, a siren moved past, bored and slow. We reached the back wall and stopped. The spot where the brick didn't match had been touched. You could see the smear of fingers in the thin coat of wet plaster slumped over it, the way a person writing a message runs out of time. There were prints on the ground. Not like feet, not like hands. Smears where knees might have been. I turned my light slowly and caught something on the edge of it. Lionel's flashlight lay 5 feet away in the grass. The bulb still worked. It made a strange diagonal beam on the wall. Beside it, his keyring gleamed dull and wet. The young guard bent to pick it up, and I slapped his hand and told him to leave it. I don't know why I said it. I just knew that keys are doors and doors are promises, and we had already broken one. We called the police. We told them a supervisor was missing from a historic site and that the gate had been open. We said we last saw him hours earlier. I didn't say anything about a voice. I didn't say anything about a brick that didn't match. I watched the officers do the dance they do when something is weird but also might be nothing, and I wanted them to arrest the night and put it in a cell. They looked at the footprints and called them smears, and I wanted to agree because smears are human and manageable. They searched the neighboring streets, they checked the cameras that don't cover as much as people think, and then they told me to go home and that they'd call me if they needed more from me. He didn't come back. The next day, the office was full of officials and worried faces and quiet phones. They asked me the same questions 3 different ways, and I tried not to sound like a person lying. Someone from administration used the word tragedy in the first hour, and it felt impatient. Another person said he probably wandered off and had a medical event, and I wanted that to be true so badly I could taste it. I wanted him to be at a hospital with a plastic bracelet cutting into his wrist, eating Jell-O and telling a nurse she had no idea what the back wall sounded like. A week later, after the scoped searches and the paper signs and the shrinking attention, I went back at noon because I couldn't stand not to. I told myself it was to pick up my last paycheck and move my schedule. The heat was a wall. Tourists moved through in small guided clusters, laughing until the guide's voice softened their noise. I walked the path like a regular person. I reached the back wall and felt the air change. The little patch of plaster over the bad brick had dried. It was rough and uneven, the way someone with shaking hands might leave it. In the middle of it, neat as a school project, someone had pressed in 5 fingernail marks, all the same length, all angled downward. I stood there longer than was reasonable. I wanted to put my fingers where those marks were and feel if they fit. I wanted to press my ear to the vent and hear nothing. I wanted to hear the voice say my name and know it was just my tired brain. But I didn't touch it. I didn't lean in. I turned away and walked back toward the office and nearly ran into Brigitte. She looked at me like I'd skipped a step she needed me to take. We hugged because that's what people do when they care and don't have the right words. "Do you hear it?" she asked after a minute. I didn't ask what she meant. "Not at home," I said. "Only when I think about it." She nodded. "That's how it starts to live with you. Not loud, it's patient. I changed my shift. You should too. Leave the night alone. That's their time. There is the sun and there is the wall. Pick the sun." I switched to days. I learned to love the voices of tourists because they are daylight and they want souvenirs, not souls. I like telling teenage boys to stop climbing the tombs. I like shaking out the gate rug in the morning and seeing the dust move in honest air. Most nights I sleep well. Most. On certain afternoons when the air presses close and you can smell rain and metal, I walk the back path slowly and stop near the bad brick. Not close, just near. I don't say anything. I think of Lionel kneeling with his palm against the wall. I think of the 5 little grooves someone made with perfect care. I think of my name, the way it sounds in my mother's voice and in mine and in the voice that lives inside the stone. And sometimes when the tour groups are far away and the interstate noise is a soft hiss and the magnolia drops something heavy that rolls, the air changes near the vent. It goes cool for a second. It threads the sweat on my neck with something like breath. When that happens, I leave. I lock the gate behind me and go sit where the sun is strongest, on the front step where the heat makes the iron too hot to touch. I listen to people laugh and argue and point. I watch the distorted reflection of myself in the black paint. I look like a man minding a door. I remind myself that a door is a line you draw for a reason. I remind myself that there are conversations you never start, because one answer is all it takes to become the person who opens something he can't close. I still hear my name sometimes, plain as any voice. It comes from behind the seam of rock. It waits until I am tired and the light is shifting. It is patient. I don't answer and I won't. But if you ever find yourself in that little city of the dead, if you ever feel a cool ribbon of air on the back of your hand when everything else is hot as a stovetop, I'm asking you for something I didn't know to ask for in time. Don't put your ear to the vent. Don't touch the brick. Don't believe the way your name sounds when it comes through stone. Some doors are never meant to be opened, and some voices never stop once you've heard them. I worked nights in Sleepy Hollow the year my landlord died, and the rent moved higher than my heartbeat. It was one of those in-between jobs people do when they're trying to catch their breath. I told myself it was temporary. A few months as a seasonal groundskeeper at the cemetery, keep my head down, put away some money, get back to a real career. That was the story. The truth is, it felt nice to be invisible, pushing a cart through quiet paths while the Hudson breathed out fog and the train horns smudged the dark. The official name on the schedule was Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, but there was a section everybody still called Rest Haven. It wasn't on the printed map they handed to tourists. If you asked at the office, they'd say it was a retired portion, older than the civil records used up and maintained in spirit, which is the kind of phrase that makes a thing sound sacred, or haunted depending on your mood. My crew was 3 regulars and a rotating extra. There was me, Luis, who was all shoulders and jokes and always had a plastic bag of sunflower seeds in his pocket, and Marla, who had cut hair that looked like she'd done it herself with a pocket knife and eyes that missed nothing. Our foreman was a man named Calder who never raised his voice but somehow made you feel like you were tracked on a clipboard inside his skull. He'd been there 27 years. The security guard, Tom, was the opposite. New, nervous, always early, headlamp too bright. On my 3rd night, while we were clearing branches after a windstorm, Luis told me about the lantern. He said it casually, like traffic on 287, like bad coffee. "You'll see it eventually," he said, busting a branch into smaller sticks. "It looks like an old oil lantern, coppery, floats waist-high. Shows up between midnight and 3. It'll drift toward Rest Haven, that's the test. If you follow it, you belong here. If you don't, you get sleep." He laughed when he said it, but he didn't swallow his sunflower seeds right away. He let them rest in his cheek like he was saving them for later. "You ever follow it?" I asked. He spat the shells neatly into a bag and tied it. "I did what they told me. You see light where it shouldn't be? You radio Calder. You don't chase it. That's the rule." I thought it was a local ghost story meant to situate the new guy, but over the next week little things made me pay attention. On Tuesday, Tom asked me if I had a spare flashlight because his kept getting real dim around Section C, then bright again up by the old Dutch church. On Wednesday, the radio in my cart picked up a station that wasn't there during the day. A man reading names at a pace that made my skin pull tight, like he was trying not to run out of air. On Thursday, I found a wire bristle brush hanging on the branch of a maple at eye level, its handle tied with green flagging tape like a breadcrumb marker. When I asked Marla, she said, "Don't pick up anything that looks placed. If you didn't drop it, leave it. We'll collect it at dawn." "What's the point of dawn?" I asked stupidly. "Things look like what they are again," she said. The first time I saw the lantern, I was alone behind the public mausoleum, sweeping up after an afternoon funeral. It was late October, unseasonably warm. A hawk screamed somewhere near the ridge, a sound that always seems like a mistake in the dark, like metal tearing. I was thinking about my landlord again. I'd cleaned out his apartment, my old place now boxed up and stacked floor to ceiling, and the smell of yellowed paper had followed me into the night. I had one of those moments where your mind goes blank and you just stand still and listen to your own weight settle. The light came from the path that led down toward the trees, steady and slow, like a person walking with careful steps. It was the color of old syrup and it moved without bouncing, level as a spirit-level line. For a heartbeat, I really thought it was someone with a lantern, which is hard to explain because who carries a lantern now? It felt like my brain reached for the closest shelf it had. "Hello?" I called and immediately wished I hadn't. My voice landed wrong in the night. The light didn't answer. It drifted across the path, passed through the shadow of a tree, and the shadow did not touch it. It moved down the slight slope toward the low place people didn't map anymore. "Radio," I told myself. "Call Calder." I raised the mic, static, that paper-white hiss, then the sound of someone taking a breath like they were about to speak at a funeral and changing their mind. I turned the dial by instinct, though there was nothing to tune. The hiss cut out, came back, cut again. I said Calder's name twice and heard my own voice bounce on the rocks. When the radio finally clicked into clarity, Tom's voice came through, too loud and too eager. "You see it?" he said. "You seeing that? Over by Rest Haven? I'm on the west gate." The radio cut. The light paused as if it had heard Tom, as if it could hear anything. Then it continued on, unhurried. I realized I'd been matching its pace without meaning to, cartwheels bumping over the old paving stones, keeping the same measured distance like a dog that wants to know what you're doing, without getting too close. When the path turned, the light turned. Where the slope leveled, it leveled. It was either very far away and perfect or right in front of me and small. I couldn't tell. "Jay," Marla's voice said behind me, and I jumped hard enough to bang my knee on the cart. She was close, wearing a knit hat with a little reflective strip. I hadn't heard her approach. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound normal. She looked past me at the light. Her jaw tightened. "Back to the building now." She put 2 fingers under my elbow and turned me like I was a grocery cart. "Do not look back," she said. "It doesn't help." I looked back. I wasn't trying to be stupid. It's just that when someone tells you not to, a part of you goes ahead. The lantern had stopped again. It hung at the height of a person's chest, ember steady, about 30 yards away. The air was warmer around it. I know that makes no sense, but I felt it. Like you feel the sun on your arm through a car window. Beyond it, the trees looked crowded together in a way trees shouldn't be. You could believe that they had moved to make a corridor. "Don't," Marla said, sharper, and I faced forward. She walked me up the path. Every hair on my arms was awake like static. At the top, where the mausoleum threw a square of shadow, she let go. "I need you to listen," she said. "Nobody follows it. We wait it out. We do the job, we go home. That's the agreement. What is it?" I asked. "A prank? Some old light on a drone?" She shook her head. "If it were a drone, you'd hear the drone. If it were a person, you'd hear their feet. You never hear anything except the light." She pressed her lips together. "And if you follow it, you don't clock out at dawn." She said it plain. I wanted to laugh because it sounded like a campfire story. I didn't. Her eyes were too still. I learned the unofficial history from Louis over coffee in the maintenance room, where the bleach smell always won. Rest Haven was where the poor were buried, plus the unclaimed and the unlucky, when they changed the boundaries decades ago and put new roads through. A records clerk discovered that the numbers didn't add up. There were more markers than names and more names than markers. Someone joked that the cemetery owed the town a dozen bodies, or the town owed the cemetery a dozen names. After that, the lantern started showing up. It had other details depending on who told it. Some people said it was a gravedigger who'd fallen into his own trench. Some said it was a woman who sat up during her funeral and scared everyone so badly. They set her coffin back down and nailed it. Some said it was a gentler thing, a guide for the lost. But every version agreed on one point. If you followed it all the way, it took you to a place without a headstone. "And it didn't bring you back, I know how that sounds," Louis said. He picked a splinter out of the table and made a neat pile. "But that's what we've got." "Has anyone you knew followed it?" I asked. He didn't look at me. "We've had turnover," he said. "It's a tough job with bad hours." "What about Tom?" I asked because he seemed the type to run toward anything. "Tom's new," Louis said. "And that headlamp is the exact wrong idea. You dull what wants to be seen and you highlight what shouldn't." The second time the lantern showed, I was ready. I had my radio clipped high, a backup flashlight, and a plan to pretend I hadn't seen it. I told myself I'd learned the trick. Don't engage. Don't narrate it in your head. Don't make it personal by saying my name in my brain while looking at it. That lasts maybe half a minute. It appeared at the bend near the low stone wall, steady as a pulse. I tried the pretend you don't see it method. My eyes flicked to the left at the exact same speed as the light moved right, as if we were in a polite dance where we avoided direct gaze. My chest went tight, a dog hearing thunder before humans do. The radio clicked. "Don't talk," Marla said. "Just keep moving." She did not say my name. "If you have to stop, stop with people." I didn't answer. I wanted to say, "Copy that," or joke, "Is it just me or is that lantern unionized now?" But I couldn't get my throat to cooperate. The light drifted into a stand of shrubs with leaves like coins. When it emerged, it was closer, and I realized something that made my scalp feel loose. The weeds, the brush tips, the thin branches, they all pushed slightly outward as if a person were moving through them, as if there were mass. But nothing bent or broke. It was the memory of weight, the way grass lies down where someone has just walked and then stands back up too fast. From then on, it was part of the routine. If it showed, we noted the time. We radioed it in. We kept to the upper paths. If tourists lingered too late, we guided them out faster than we had to. Some nights it didn't come, and those were almost worse, because you'd catch yourself looking for it. On a Friday, a week before Halloween, An older woman came right up to me while I was coiling hose and asked, "Where do you keep the unmarked graves?" She said it like she was looking for a bathroom in a museum. I told her Rest Haven was closed going on decades, and she nodded like I'd said what she expected. "My mother says her grandmother is there," she said. Her story was that a man with a lantern brought them to the right spot in the dark. She said they left biscuits and a scarf and went home before sunup. She lowered her voice and added, "My mother says that was the last night her grandmother slept through." After she left, I told Calder. His face did the same thing it always did, which is nothing you can see if you don't know him. "I'll add it to the list," he said. That night Tom didn't check in at shift change. It wasn't dramatic, we were used to small delays. Sometimes he'd take an extra loop because someone had jumped the fence to take pictures for Instagram. But when he missed the second check, Calder called his phone. It went to voicemail. He sent me and Luis on the usual sweep and told Marla to walk the fence and text him from each gate, which I realized later was a way of telling her to find any place someone had forced. The air had that pre-storm pressure, a feeling like the sky had put a hand on your head. We walked the lower east path. I could taste metal like sucking on a bent penny. Luis cracked his sunflower seeds and sucked the salt off each one slower than usual. "He'll turn up," he said. We both looked at the ground for tracks even though the weather had been dry, and the gravel held nothing. My light caught a paper tag tied to a weed, and my stomach turned until I saw it was just a survey marker from the county. It's ridiculous how many ordinary things look like signs when you're primed. When we reached the depression where the path dips and the trees lean, the world narrowed to the size of my flashlight. In that tunnel of light, an old iron post appeared. I must have walked past it 100 times and never noticed. It was knee-high and bent with a hole where a chain might have been. The top had faint letters scored by rust, R-T-A-N. The middle letters were gone. I didn't say what I read. I didn't say Rest Haven. I didn't want to do the work on its behalf. The lantern bloomed to life 5 yards ahead, like someone had lifted a cloth off it. No approach, just present. Luis stopped with me. "Okay," he said quietly. "We're going to do what we do. We're going to back up. We're going to call Calder. We are not going to make this a special night." The light moved. It angled slightly right, toward a part of the grounds where the grass has a different color, duller, like it doesn't get as much sun. Luis's hand was on my sleeve. I wasn't sure if he was holding me or steadying himself. The lantern paused over a patch of earth where the ground sank an inch lower than the surrounding strip. An old rectangle settling. If you spend enough time here, you get good at reading shallow shifts like that. You can see the pits even under grass, the way water tries to shape the land back to level and never quite succeeds. My radio crackled. I lifted it without taking my eyes off the light. Static then, very faint Tom. "I'm here," he said. "I'm fine." There was something wrong with the quality of his voice, a thinness like he was a bad copy of himself. "Don't come," he said. "It's only for one." The radio made a quiet clicking sound like someone tapping a fingernail against plastic, then died. Luis said, "Okay," as if that decided anything. He took a slow breath and made a controlled step backward. The lantern moved in a smooth arc to the left, as if considering us, as if adjusting its angle for better persuasion. And then the light brightened. Not by much, but like a polite increase, the way a host raises the dimmer at dinner when you're squinting at your plate. The warmth came with it, almost affectionate. The trees made a sound. It wasn't wind. It was like a room of people inhaling at the same time. The hair on the back of my neck pulled. I thought of the woman who told me about the scarf. I thought of biscuits left on the ground like offerings. I thought of Tom, who had laughed too loud and had his headlamp on full beam like he could hold back history with lumens. I don't know what made me do it, but I said his name out loud. The light dimmed, as if my voice had made it shy. Luis said my name quietly, warning, and my name seemed to taste different in the air than it does indoors. I made a mistake then. I stepped one pace forward. It felt small and also like crossing a line that had only ever existed in my head. The light seemed to register it. It didn't come toward me. It didn't retreat. It tipped ever so slightly as if nodding approval. And in that tip, I thought I saw the shape of a hand under the glow, not the lamp's hook or a handle. A hand floating a foot below it, palm up, the way you carry a bowl so it doesn't spill. I thought of what Marla said. The agreement. I thought of how easy it would be to be the kind of person who says I didn't really see it. I backed up until my heels hit the edge of the path. My mouth was dry enough to hurt. I said into the radio, "Calder, we have the light in Rest Haven. We have a voice on Channel 3. Advise." Silence. Then Marla, "Hold position." "Do not follow." "I'm on my way to you. Do not let it out of your sight. Do not let it know your full name." It was such a strange thing to hear over a work radio that my brain latched onto it like a hook. All at once I was fiercely aware that in my first week, I had told everyone my full name. I'd said it twice to a delivery driver, and once to a lost family trying to find a plot. I imagined the syllables of it floating like dandelion seeds through the trees, landing where they wanted. Marla arrived with her knit hat low and her flashlight down at her side. She stood with us without comment for a long minute. The light hovered over the same rectangle in the ground, patient. Finally she said, "Tom," not into the radio, not loud, just the name placed in the air like setting down a tool. From the dark beyond the lantern, something answered. It was his voice, but the way a voice sounds on the far side of a phone in a house you don't recognize. "Yes," it said. "I'm here." Marla nodded like he'd said something acceptable. "We're going to keep your gate open," she said, "and check back every hour. You'll do what you need to do, and then at dawn, if you can move, you'll walk uphill." "Okay," the voice said, agreeable as if none of this was alarming. There was a pause. "It's warmer down here," it added, like a child proving he was okay by pointing out a detail. The light tipped again, that tiny host's nod, and dimmed. "Not out, just less." It drifted a few feet to the right, and another shallow rectangle showed itself in the change of light. The ground there had subsided in a different way, more oval than square. The lantern hung over it like a thought over a word you can't bring to your lips. "We're leaving now," Marla said, and touched my sleeve once, the way you might touch a dog to make it follow. Luis exhaled so slowly that I wanted to tell him breathe. We walked up the path. I felt the light on my back the way you feel a window. At the maintenance building, Calder met us with a map that looked like no one had consulted it in years. It had hand-drawn rectangles in a section without roads. He ran a finger along them like a blind man reading. "He's not the first," he said. I don't know if that was to comfort us or himself. "We'll stay. We'll keep eyes." He glanced at me. "You can go home, Jay." I didn't. I sat on a bucket in the doorway and watched the sky bleed lighter very slowly. I texted no one. It felt like if I told any person who had not breathed this air, the story would become a story and flatten, lose its teeth. Around 4, a train moved along the river, and its horn made the kind of sound that pulls your guts along with it. Around 5, the birds tried a few practice notes and then shut up again, like they'd remembered where they were. At 6, the horizon had a line of gray like an unpainted wall. We went back together. It felt like a rule, whether it was or not. The light was still there, but washed out like it was behind gauze. It hovered over a spot that wasn't either of the earlier rectangles. The warmth was gone, or maybe the dawn swallowed it. We stood and watched it breathe itself thinner until finally it wasn't. The place it had been looked like everywhere else. The kind of sameness that made me understand why people plant flowers. Like a label, like a proof. We called for Tom until my throat felt raw. We walked the dips and edges, careful not to step on the softest patches. We looked for a hat, for a scuffed mark, for anything. The ground told us what ground tells, that it has been holding secrets longer than our names have been making mouths. At 8, Calder called the police, the kind of call that has a shape built into it. A missing security guard. We gave times, we gave our last contact. We did not say light, we said a disturbance, which is the same as saying nothing and everything. They asked for Tom's last known position, and we could only point at a swath of land with different grass and an iron post with letters you couldn't quite make whole Tom's. Headlamp turned up under a low cedar 2 days later, unscuffed, batteries full. It had no dirt on it. It looked like a display model. They called his apartment and his mother and his cousin. They put his face on the news in a square that didn't fit him. For a week the lantern didn't show. The nights felt wrong in a new way, like what had moved through them had moved somewhere else. On the 8th night, it came back. I was raking leaves out of the flat stones with a motion I'd used so many times it was more like scratching an itch than work. I had promised myself to quit after Halloween, and I hadn't told anyone yet. I watched the light appear at the edge of the path and move with its unhurried confidence toward the low ground. It paused by the iron post, and then, in an act that meant nothing to anyone except me, it swung its glow up and down like weighing something. Like measuring, I said into the radio. I see it, and left it at that. My voice didn't shake. Maybe I'd run out of whatever shakes I did not follow. I did not turn away. I did what we do. I watched it pick a place. I watched it hover like a finger over a name not written. A small wind moved across my face, and I had the sensation you get when you're about to remember a word you've forgotten for days. It hung there, the almost of knowing, and then it passed. I quit the job in the middle of November. I told Calder I needed a schedule that matched daylight. He nodded like this was a thing he had prepared for. He shook my hand like he was stamping me with a date. Marla hugged me with one arm and said, "You did good," as if there had been a test I didn't know I'd taken. Luis gave me a bag of seeds and said, "Sunflower. Plant them where the light is worst," which I think was a joke and also not. On my last night, I took a slow drive past the gates as a person, not a worker. It felt different. I parked and sat with my hands on the wheel and told myself I was making sure the hood wouldn't overheat. The grounds looked like the surface of a lake with wind moving over it. The lantern didn't show for me. I had wanted it to and wanted it not to, and either way I would have driven home. With my jaw clenched, I'm writing this down now, because I've started waking up at 3:12 with the exact sensation that my name is being spoken 3 rooms away in a house I don't live in anymore. Not shouted, just said, with that weight some people put on a name when it's time to go. When I get up and look out at the street, sometimes there's a reflection in my window that looks like a small, steady light. It's always something explainable when I lean close. A car on the next block, someone's porch bulb, the way a distant elevator reflects in a facade. But it takes a second, and in that second my mouth goes dry and my scalp loosens. It takes me longer and longer to go back to sleep. If you're thinking, you made half of that up, I would have agreed with you before I took that job. Here's what I know, like I know the weight of the rake and the sound of a train in fog. There are places where the numbers don't add up. And you can either pretend that the extra doesn't exist, or you can make room for it in the way you talk about the world. The agreement we had wasn't about fear. It was about respect for what doesn't want to be solved. If you ever work nights near a place called anything like Rest Haven, if you see a coppery light moving low and smooth, without bounce, and you feel warmth on your face when the air is cold, don't follow. You are not the person it wants, even if it feels like you are. Call someone who knows the place. Stand with them. Say as little as possible. Be careful with your full name. Get to dawn. And if a voice you know says he's fine from somewhere that doesn't echo right, and if he tells you it's only for one, believe him. There are lanes that can't take 2 abreast. There are gates that won't swing both directions. If you want proof, you won't get it from me. I can tell you about an iron post with letters that won't complete. I can tell you about rectangles that sink back into themselves. I can tell you about a headlamp that never picked up a speck of dirt. Sometimes, with the window cracked and the city making its nighttime noises, I catch the faintest warm smell, like a wick just after it's blown out. It's not strong. You could miss it if you were sleeping well. It lingers at the edge of rooms, on the underside of thoughts, at the edges of maps with blank corners. It makes me want to pack biscuits into a bag and a scarf into my pocket and go out before dawn to leave something where the grass lies differently. I have not done it. I think that's the only reason I'm still writing this down. The last text I got from Tom is still on my phone. It's nothing. It's a meme about a raccoon with a baguette. When I open it at 3 in the morning, the brightness of the screen makes a small, steady glow in my window. If someone were standing outside looking up, they might see the light and think it was a guide. They might think it meant safety. I don't let the thought go any further than that. There are things in this world that lead you toward the truth in a straight line. This isn't one of them. This one leads you to a place where there should be a name and there isn't, and asks you to be okay with that. Most of us are not. That's why the light keeps coming back. That's why it pauses and waits, polite, patient, warm. That's why there will always be someone like Tom, new and eager and certain the right equipment makes you invincible. It's not a judgment. It's just the numbers we live with, the missing and the accounted for, the written stone and the little dip in the grass that says someone is there whether you say so or not. Sleepy Hollow is not a story. It's a town with commuters and checkout lines and people who don't think about the dark until a train horn smears it like a thumb across a painting. Rest Haven is not a brand. It's a habit the earth has of holding on to what you set down. These are just facts. I tell myself that when the smell of warm metal wakes me, and that gentle urge to walk presses at my spine. I tell myself I have already said yes to what I needed to say yes to and no to what would have finished the sentence with my name. If you read this and decide I'm just spooking myself, that's fine. Keep it that way. If you read this and recognize the way the grass lies where it shouldn't, hold on to that recognition and lock your doors a little earlier tonight. If you work there now, if you're the one with the keys jangling and the radio that turns to static when you need it most, if your headlamp throws hard shadows that look like black doors, then take this and put it in your back pocket with the extra batteries and the cheap pen that always writes even in the cold. All it says on the one line that matters is simple: don't follow the light. Dawn has its own rules and it keeps them. Night does too. The lantern of Rest Haven comes when it wants and leaves when it wants. It is not ours. It never was. I write this so I don't forget the shape of the agreement, the edges of the map, the taste of metal on the tongue when the warm glow lifts like a host showing you to your place. When I'm old, if I get old, and someone asks me what I learned from my in-between job, I will tell them this: there are names you can say and names you can only stand near. There are places you visit and places that visit you. At 3:12 this morning, the smell came again. I did not get up. I lay there and counted the space between breaths and listened for my full name spoken in a voice almost right. It didn't come. The light I saw on the wall turned out to be a neighbor's car reversing. I am grateful for that ordinary explanation in a way I never was before. I try to be grateful for all the ordinary things, the things that mean you made it to morning. Still, I keep a bag of biscuits by the door. And a scarf. I haven't decided who they're for. I hope I don't find out. I'm not from Savannah. I only meant to spend one weekend there on my way down to visit my sister in Jacksonville. The plan was to shoot some photos for my tiny travel blog, eat something with too much butter, and get back on the highway. I had a cheap room near Victory Drive and a list of the usual spots: Forsyth Park, River Street, a couple of squares. Bonaventure Cemetery wasn't on my list until I heard laughter in a place where nobody should be laughing. It happened on my first morning. I was walking east along the riverfront after sunrise, trying to catch the light on the old brick. Two kids cut past me in a rush, maybe 10, maybe 12. They had that breathless, gleeful energy that makes adults smile reflexively. They were holding a Polaroid camera and a folded map. The smaller one looked back like he thought he knew me and said, "Resurrection Hill," like it was a password and I should follow. Then they were gone, slaloming through a group of tourists and vanishing down the steps. The name stuck in my head. I figured it was a Halloween thing or a tour gimmick. When I Googled Bonaventure later, I didn't see Resurrection Hill on any official map. But I did see 10 different blogs with nearly identical photos: angel statues draped with Spanish moss, family plots like stone parlors, and pathways buried in leaves. Everyone used words like hauntingly beautiful, as if they had copied and pasted the description. By late afternoon, I'd talked myself into going. It felt like something the city was nudging me toward. A waitress at lunch said Bonaventure closes at dusk and to watch the mud by the river because it sucks at your shoes like oatmeal. She also told me to bring water and be kind to the groundskeeper if I met him. "Mr. Dowell," she said. Big man, white mustache, always chewing on a peppermint. He pretends he's mean, but he'll show you where the best angels are. I drove over the bridge with the air conditioning on full blast and the radio low. The entrance to Bonaventure felt like walking into a church, where the ceiling had been replaced with sky. The live oaks marched in rows, trailing moss in gray curtains. Everything else was quiet enough to make your teeth ache. A few people were there with cameras, and a tour group was gathered around a guide who spoke in that clipped, confident way of people who repeat the same stories every day. He talked about a famous little girl's grave and how people leave toys. He told them about writers who came here to find inspiration. The tourists nodded and took photos of one another leaning against stones they didn't read. I wandered away from them. My camera is nothing special. I like the ritual more than the results. Focus, breath, click, the soft mechanical sound like a gate closing. I took a dozen shots and found myself in a part of the cemetery where the path steepened. It rose gently toward a low ridge line. There was no sign for it, but I knew the name by the way the air changed. The light up there felt thinner, like it had been filtered through old glass, and I could hear something faint. If you've ever heard a playground at a distance when the wind is moving right, you know how it sounds. Joy breaks apart into pieces. A shriek, a high voice, the slap of sneakers. That weird metal knock of swings hitting metal posts. What I heard at Bonaventure was like that, but with the edges smoothed off, as if the sound had been wrapped in gauze for years. It was laughter for sure, and it was coming from the hill. I told myself there must be a school nearby or a park on the other side of the road. Then I remembered the waitress saying the ground's close at dusk and that kids aren't supposed to run around unsupervised. I climbed. The hill wasn't much. A rise, a cluster of family plots with their own little fences and a half circle of angel statues facing inward, like they'd been arranged for a photograph 100 years ago. Some were child-sized and some were tall, but they all had that soft, sorrowful look marble gets after it stands in weather long enough. I could have sworn the eyes on one were just a bit too detailed, as if someone had gone back with a knife to sharpen the stare. The laughter faded when I stepped between the stones. It didn't die off naturally. It ended on a high note, like someone pressed a stop on a recording. In that silence, I heard a peppermint wrapper crinkle. "Don't linger," a voice said behind me. It was deep and calm, like the kind of voice you want to obey. Without asking why, I turned to see the big man with the mustache and the peppermint, Mr. Dowell. He looked like he could lift a lawn mower with one hand and didn't have patience for nonsense. His shirt had Bonaventure stitched in green over the pocket. He pointed at the row of angels. "You pass through, you take your picture, you keep to the path," he said. "No touching. No sitting on the stones. No rubbing names with charcoal paper. Folks have been bad about that lately." "Sorry," I said. "I heard some kids," he chewed. "You hear a lot out here. Sometimes people hear music. Sometimes a train whistle from 50 years ago. The river throws sound strange." He eyed my camera. "What are you after?" "Just exploring. I heard about a place called Resurrection Hill." "Then you found it," he said. "People call it that because the families up here wrote fancy words on their stones. Triumph, glory, resurrection. You know how the living can be." The name stuck, and now I have to tell teenagers to stop coming up here at night with candles. I laughed, and for a second his face softened like he wanted to laugh too. "Is that a big problem?" I asked. "Not a big problem," he said. "Just a problem that repeats itself. People don't think places have memories. They act like they're the first ones to disobey a sign." He shifted his peppermint to the other side of his mouth. "You got until the shades change. After that I do a sweep and lock the gate. We're down a guard this week, so be a help and don't make me chase you." "I won't," I said. I took a photo of the semicircle of angels and another of a small statue, with 2 children holding a wreath. I don't know why I took the third. It wasn't interesting. It was a plain angel, hands folded, head slightly tilted. When I looked at the screen, the tilt seemed more pronounced, like the statue was listening to me. I told myself it was the lens distorting the angle. Dowell left me with a nod and a reminder about the gate. The air went hot and flat again. A couple wandered by on the path below, whispering to each other in a language I didn't recognize. A tour group laughed at something, then drifted away into the shade. I stayed on the hill longer than I should have because a blue jay kept hopping from statue to statue, dropping feathers that looked like bits of sky. I collected one and stuck it in my notebook like a kid. The first weird thing happened when I checked the third photo again. The plain angel's head had turned a few degrees. Not much, enough to notice if you pay attention for a living. The second weird thing was that my camera didn't record the time of the photo. The metadata was blank where the timestamp should be. I assumed I'd accidentally changed a setting. I'm not great with the menus, and sweat was stinging my eyes. The sun dipped faster than I expected. 1 second everything was glossy, and the next it felt like a dimmer switch had been turned. The cemetery takes on this bluish underwater tone when the light goes like that. Every shadow looks like a place to step around rather than through. I started for the car and heard it again, that broken up laughter. It was closer. It came from the hill I was leaving. I turned and saw no one. I told myself I was thirsty, and that sound travels strangely in big, open spaces. On the way down, I met a couple in their late 50s who asked if I knew where the statue with the bird was. They meant the famous one with the child and the bird that people photograph. I pointed them in the direction of the tour I'd seen earlier, and they thanked me and hurried off, holding hands. Their politeness made the place feel safe again, like fear was something I'd borrowed for a moment and could return. I made it to the gate to find it closed. Not locked, but closed. The little sign with hours was slightly crooked. I looked at my phone. The time felt wrong. My phone said 6:07 earlier than it felt. Dowell must have swept the other side first, I thought, and pulled the gate open. It groaned like a theater effect. I hate being the last person to leave anywhere. The way a restaurant empties around you if you linger too long. I rushed to my car and took one last glance at the hill. There was a child standing at the edge of it near the Plain Angel. Maybe 8, maybe younger. It was hard to tell because of the light. I could see the cowlick in his hair and how one knee of his jeans was lighter from wear. He raised the Polaroid camera and snapped a picture. Then something I couldn't process happened. He looked down at the developing square and smiled like he saw exactly what he was hoping to see. When he looked up again, I forgot how to breathe. He had the kind of face where the features don't sit exactly where you expect them, like a familiar face copied by someone who had to guess at the spacing. It wasn't malformed. It was almost correct. That's a worse feeling, I promise. He lifted his free hand and waved at me without enthusiasm, more of a signal than a hello. Then he stepped back and the Plain Angel was there, practically touching his shoulder. Its head was turned. I blinked and it was just stones and trees. I got in the car and drove to my motel with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. The air smelled like hot pine needles and something faintly sweet, maybe the peppermint from Dowell's pocket lingering in my sinuses. I told myself I had been dehydrated. I told myself I had wanted to see something, and so I did. That night I texted Tara. She's my friend from college and the closest thing I have to a second brain. She lives in Atlanta and knows how to balance skepticism with curiosity without making me feel stupid. I told her about the laughter and the boy and the photo. She wrote back fast, "Bonaventure is famous. Everyone goes there and comes back with a story." "Did you save the photos?" "Yes," I wrote. I sent her the 3 images. She sent back 3 question marks. "Why are the angels different?" I zoomed in. In the first photo, the semicircle of angels looked like they had looked in real life, heads angled inward. In the second, subtle differences. One hand was lower on a wreath than I remembered. In the third, the Plain Angel's head was turned toward the camera. It was not a trick of light. The head was facing me, chin dropped just slightly as if trying to get on my level. "It's a glitch," I typed. "Sunlight shift, lens distortion." "Sure," she wrote. "Want me to come down tomorrow?" "It's only 4 hours. I could meet you. We can go together, and if nothing else, it will make a good story." I told her to come. I told myself it would be funny in the morning. It wasn't. The motel woke up full of noise. Doors slammed, trucks idled, someone argued in a hallway. I went down to the lobby early and watched a few families eat cereal out of paper bowls. The TV showed weather. A storm was forming somewhere out in the Atlantic, and the talking head used words like cone of uncertainty and spaghetti models, while a ticker at the bottom repeated the day's date like a metronome. Tara arrived around noon, scooping me up in a hug that made the stiffness in my shoulders dissolve for a second. She looked around the lot. "You look like you didn't sleep." "I didn't," I said. "I kept hearing kids running in the hallway," she laughed. "The hallway is full of kids. It's a travel motel. They were literally running past me when I came in." We went back to Bonaventure with iced coffee sweating in our hands. The parking area was busier. A bus had disgorged a crowd that followed a man with a straw hat and a microphone headset. When he saw us wandering off the main path, he called, "Don't get lost. This place looks smaller than it is." Tara rolled her eyes and veered toward the river, then looped back like a bloodhound catching a scent. We climbed to the hill. Tara didn't say anything for a full minute, which is rare. She has opinions on everything from the right way to stack dishes, to the correct order of songs on a long drive. She walked the semicircle, hands tucked into her pockets, head tilted. "Okay," she said quietly. "I see what you mean." "I didn't tell you what I meant yet," I said. "You don't have to. This feels like something is held here on purpose. Not a bad thing. Just held." We took photos with our phones and with my camera. Tara took one with the useless ultra-wide setting that makes everything look like it curves. I rolled my eyes and she caught me and laughed. A blue jay landed on the Plain Angel. She raised her phone to catch it and murmured, "Don't move." Mr. Dowell arrived like he'd been summoned. Maybe the sound of laughter brought him. It was happening again, that faint playground noise. We didn't speak. We stood like disobedient students until he reached us. He dipped his head to Tara and then to me. "You came back," he said. "I brought a witness," I said. "I swear I'm not messing with anything. We just wanted to look." "You won't be the first or the last," he said. He glanced at the Plain Angel like he knew we were watching that one specifically. "She has a way of getting in people's heads. She? I asked. People here assign names where there aren't names, he said. Makes it easier to talk about stones. There's a story that the family that commissioned this angel asked the sculptor to make her look down, to watch over their children. He made her a little too attentive. Then the smaller boy fell in the river and drowned, and the mother snapped at the stone and told her she was no good at her job. By winter, the angel was facing away. That's the story. I've heard it a dozen ways. True or not, people repeat it like truth. He was watching Tara's face, waiting for the reaction. She gave him a polite one. That is a great story, she said. Do you hear kids up here sometimes? You hear what the place remembers, he said. It's not the same thing every time. That's the trouble with memory. It keeps what it can carry. A phone rang nearby, one of those old-fashioned tones people said ironically. A woman down the path answered and turned away, covering her other ear. Tara stepped closer to the plane angel. This is going to sound weird, she said. But has anyone ever said she moves? Dowell didn't flinch. They say that about a lot of angels, he said. They used to say it about one over by the wrought iron fence until a branch fell and took her head off. Now they say she moans in the wind. People put movement on things because it helps them make sense of smaller changes. Shadows. Tilt in the ground. The way your own feet shift your perspective. No stone here moves on its own. Trust me, I'd be the one to fill out the paperwork. He didn't smile at his own joke. He folded a peppermint wrapper into a small square, then unfolded it and folded it again, as if keeping his hands busy kept the place steady. We thanked him and he went on his way. Tara leaned in and said, He's absolutely lying to make himself feel better. We stayed a while. A storm cloud built over the river and cast the whole cemetery in a soft, false twilight that made everything detail sharpen. The laughter came and went. Once I thought I heard quick feet behind me and spun to find no one in the path. Twice I saw a flash of denim near the plane angel, like the knee of a child ducking behind stone. Tara caught me looking and shook her head, but not because she thought I was wrong, because she didn't want to say yes out loud. When the first fat drops hit, we went back to my car. We promised each other we wouldn't get dramatic. We promised to meet again at the hill at dusk when the place emptied just to see. An hour, Tara said. No longer. And we tell someone we're coming so this doesn't turn into one of those stories where people say, why didn't they tell anyone? We'll text Officer Ruiz. I thought she was kidding until she waved down a patrol car that idled near the entrance. Officer Ruiz turned out to be a woman with a high braid and a no-nonsense manner, who took down our names and the description of my Nissan. You'd be surprised how often I get these arrangements, she said. People like to scare themselves. Be out by closing. If you're not, I'll come nudge you. Don't make me call Mr. Dowell, he hates that. At dusk we went back up, 2 idiots with phones and 1 camera, promising we were here to be ordinary. No candles, no salt circles, no speaking to stones. The cemetery shed people the way a tide sheds foam. We waited until the quiet deepened, until you can feel it in your teeth again. Then we heard a new sound. It wasn't laughter. It was that papery fuft of a Polaroid ejecting from its shell. Hello, Tara said softly, not to anyone in particular. We're leaving in a minute. Something flicked the back of my hand. I looked down and found a feather, blue as a paint chip perfectly placed in my palm. It wasn't there a second ago. The jay scolded us from a branch. I should have laughed. I couldn't. The hill felt like it was holding a breath, waiting to see what we would do. I took the 3rd photo again. Same angle, same frame, same light. When I checked the screen, the plane angel was not looking at me. She was angled toward the empty space just off the edge of the photograph, as if someone stood there too close to catch. The metadata line for the time was blank again. Let's go, Tara said. She didn't say it like a suggestion. We started down the path, not running, not dawdling. The gate was shut. The sky had gone that flat, heavy gray that means rain will happen whether you want it or not. Tara pulled at the gate and it didn't budge. It's not locked, she said. It's just stuck. We both pulled. The metal scraped and gave like a stubborn drawer. I heard a small voice behind us say my name. I didn't turn. I don't know why. Maybe some leftover animal rule. Instead, I looked at Tara. She had heard it too. Her eyes were wider than I've ever seen them, and she's watched a tornado roll over the interstate. We're going to keep walking, she said in a voice she uses with anxious dogs. We are not going to be rude. We walked. The voice said my name again, but it wasn't right. It didn't fit in the shape of human mouths. And yet the sound made my brain slot into place like it had been waiting for it since morning. The gate gave and we slipped through. I expected relief to crash over me. Instead, I felt this small, mean sadness, like I disappointed someone. Officer Ruiz cruised up the lane and slowed. She saw our faces and lowered the window. "You two good?" "We're good," Tara said. "We're leaving." "Good," Ruiz said. "Storm's gonna make the road slick. Go straight. Don't take the scenic way." Back at the motel, we didn't talk much. Tara took the chair by the window and ate half a sandwich she didn't remember buying. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling like it might start telling me the truth. When my phone buzzed, I flinched. It was a message from an unknown number. A photo. No text. The photo was of the gate from inside the cemetery. In front of it stood the back of a boy in jeans with a lighter knee. His head was tilted like he was listening to someone talk just out of frame. In his right hand, he held a Polaroid. The white space at the bottom had a messy thumbprint in it. The image wasn't fully developed. You could still see the greenish cast, but the shape on the paper had already clarified. It was a circle of angels, and one of them was looking right at the camera with her head turned, chin lowered to meet the eyes of whoever was holding the phone. "Wrong number," I typed stupidly, as if the universe could misdial. No reply came. I tried to call back and got the kind of empty sound that comes when a number is temporary or a phone is turned off forever. We drove to Atlanta together the next morning. It felt like leaving a party before the part where people start breaking glasses. Tara watched the road while I scrolled through the pictures on my camera again, comparing them like a forensic accountant. We argued gently about whether anything had really happened. We avoided the bigger argument about whether it matters. A week later at home, I printed the third photo on my cheap inkjet. It looked wrong on paper. The head was turned, but it seemed to be searching now for something it had misplaced. I checked the timestamp again out of habit. The metadata field wasn't blank anymore. It had a time. The time wasn't when I took it. It was the exact minute the unknown number had texted me the picture of the gate. I didn't notice that right away. Tara did when she came to visit. She pointed and then didn't say anything for a long time. We drank our coffee like the act of doing something ordinary might reset the day. A month after that, a padded envelope showed up with no return address. Inside was a Polaroid. It had the same greenish cast as the one from the text. It showed the semicircle of angels, but not the one we had been watching. It showed a smaller statue I only half remembered, a child angel with a missing fingertip. The Polaroid had something stuck on the white bottom edge, a blue feather flattened under clear tape, bright as a sky pressed into a box. I've started hearing that gauzy playground laughter in other cities, once in a grocery store near the freezer aisle, where everything echoes if you open the doors. Once while walking past a construction site closing up for the day. It never lasts long. It always fades like a recording cut off mid-giggle. I don't go looking for cemeteries anymore. That feels like bait. Mr. Dowell, if you're reading this, I did my part. I kept to the paths. I didn't touch the stones. I left before the gate shut. But you know this already. You probably watched us from the edge of the hill and chewed your peppermint and hoped we wouldn't give the place anything else to hold. If you go to Bonaventure and you climb the rise people call Resurrection Hill, do what the sign says and then do one more thing. Take your photos if you have to. Then stand in the semicircle and listen for what the place remembers. It might be church music. It might be a train whistle. It might be kids playing on a day so ordinary, you will feel a deep, painful longing to go home and put your backpack down and find a cold drink. You'll want to stay, but don't. Because the last thing you want is for an angel to meet your eye and tilt her head toward you the way grown-ups do when they expect you to follow. A few nights ago, I woke up at 3:17. I know the minute because it was on the stove clock when I went to the kitchen. My apartment was quiet except for the refrigerator ticking softly as it cycled. On the counter, next to the fruit bowl, was the blue feather from my notebook. I hadn't moved it. It lay there like it had been placed very carefully by hands that didn't know how hard to pin something you want to keep. I picked it up and felt a grain of grit stuck to the quill. Marble dust tastes metallic like old rain. I don't know why I put it on my tongue. It felt like turning toward a voice when it says your name the way your mother used to. I put the feather back. I checked the lock on my door. I stood for a long time staring at my own face in the microwave's reflection, trying to decide if anything about it looked almost right. I'm not going back. That's the truth I'm clinging to. But if you find yourself on that hill with the air thin as if filtered through old glass, don't wave back first. Don't wait to see if the gate sticks. Don't long for the sound of children like a dog hearing its name. Leave, and leave before whatever is listening decides you are polite and therefore easy to keep. I'm not proud of how I ended up at Boot Hill after closing time. It wasn't part of any plan. I was supposed to be in Tucson that week for a work thing, a boring training with coffee that tasted like cardboard, and I decided to take a day off the schedule and drive to Tombstone, because the name had been in my head since I was a kid. My dad loved old westerns. He'd whistle the dusty melodies under his breath while patching drywall or changing oil, and I learned to pick them out without even thinking. When you grow up around that sound, you can tell a cattle song from a saloon tune the way you can tell rain from hail. I brought my friend Jamie because he's one of those people who thinks road trips are a personality trait. He took pictures through the windshield and narrated our route as if he were streaming to an invisible audience. The desert turned red and flat, and then you see the sign for Tombstone like you've driven off the interstate and into an old movie. We did the tourist stuff first. The gunfight reenactment, the boardwalk with the swinging doors, the kind of chili that will salt your bones. It felt like a set that never got struck, like everybody went home one night and left the town turned on waiting. We hit Boot Hill around 4, when the sun throws long spears between the markers. The cemetery is smaller than I imagined, but the markers make it feel crowded. Crosses with names, crosses with nothing but unknown, pebbles stacked like little promises. A few bullet-scarred headboards that look too thin to have lasted this long. It's a strange place to feel calm, but I did. Even the wind had a respectful way of moving there, like it put its hands in its pockets and kept its eyes down. There was a man at the gate in a denim shirt and a straw hat, taking cash for entry and telling people not to sit on the graves. His name tag said Cal, and he had the gentlest voice I'd heard in months. When I asked for a map, he leaned in like he had a better thing than a printed sheet. "You looking for anything in particular?" he said. "Just the usual," Jamie answered, grinning. "Hanged versus shot. Murders of passion, frontier justice." Cal kept his eyes on me, not Jamie. I'd heard my dad hum a tune in my head on the walk up, and I guess it still lived on my face. "You ever heard the singing?" Cal asked me, softer than wind through grass. "What singing?" I said. Cal turned the corner of his mouth down like he knew we'd ask that. At sundown, there's a hum from one of the unknowns. Folks say it's some old trail song. Not every night, but most. It'll start quiet, like it's way off, then it's right there by your ear. "Always the same grave. Which one?" Jamie asked. His camera was halfway out of his sling. Cal tapped the map with a blunt finger. "Back row near the fence. Headboard's been shot to lace. People put coins on it. Don't whistle back if you hear it." It was corny as hell, the kind of thing you tell kids on a field trip. But he didn't smile, and there was something about the way he said "don't whistle back," like he'd had to say it more than once and didn't like the memory. We wandered the path anyway. Jamie snapped pictures of bouquet ribbons and names. I took my hat off and put it back on 3 times for no reason. There were other people there. 2 women in matching sun hats, a couple arguing in low voices about where to get dinner. A teenager dramatizing a selfie by lying down on the walkway like he'd been shot. The air smelled like dry wood and a little like creosote, the smell that comes before rain. It made the whole place feel charged. We found the headboard. It stood crooked, the wood riddled with small ragged mouths like someone emptied a pistol into it and then changed their mind and used a rifle for emphasis. There wasn't a name, just unknown, and the dates were arranged like a shrug, 1880s. Coins lay on the dirt like tiny suns. Somebody had left a small tin star that had already rusted at the edges. I felt like I should say something polite to the ground, but I couldn't come up with anything that wasn't wrong. "What do you think?" Jamie said. "If we're quiet, does a ghost sing for us? Do we need to pay admission for that part?" "You heard what he said," I told him. "Don't whistle back," he laughed. "Yeah, okay, Mom." We waited because sundown was coming and because it's easy to pretend you don't care about a legend until your body starts counting down for you. The other visitors drifted off. Cal made one more lap, picking up a crumpled program and tucking it into a trash bag. He lifted his hand at us without stopping. The gate clicked. The light thinned. You don't realize how loud a desert is until it gets quiet, and then you notice everything. A cricket in the brush, a truck somewhere on the highway Dopplering away, Jamie checking his phone, the glass tapping his jacket zipper, a sparrow tilting on a wire at the fence line, turning its head like it expected to be included. The first sound was easy to miss. I thought it was the wire itself singing the way metal does when it's got a little wind on it. It was only 3 notes climbing, like the beginning of a call. I looked at Jamie to see if he'd heard it, and his eyes were on mine like a mirror. The second phrase unrolled the way a familiar thing does, and the back of my neck went warm. It wasn't the wire. It was a human hum. Whoever it was, they knew the tune well enough to relax inside it. I knew it too. Not the words, which I couldn't have recited if you threatened me, but the bones of it. My dad's breath against the brim of his cap while he bent over the hood of our stupid old truck. He used to hum this exact shape. Trail longing and dry roads and home very far away. I looked at the ground out of reflex because some part of me thought the sound was rising from the dirt like water through a pipe. Jamie said too loudly, "It's a prank. Someone put a speaker out here." We stood without moving. My hands remembered how to find each other. The humming grew, not louder but closer. It had a throat to it now, a chest. There were little breaks where someone might have taken a breath. It wasn't perfect. The singer had the tiniest catch on the high notes, the kind of catch a person gets if they've been walking and talking and haven't had water in a while. That small imperfection made it feel more real than crystal clarity would have. "It's the fence," Jamie said. His voice had lost some of its bounce. "Wind on the fence." "There's no wind," I said. We listened until I could tell when the singer would hold a note and when they'd fall off it early like they'd thought better of it. The melody never reached the part where a person would expect words. It skirted that moment and circled back. It paced, the cricket shut up. The sparrow lifted off and went. A car door slammed far away and sounded like it belonged to another map. The hum shifted toward my left ear and then my right. It stopped being a direction and became more of a pressure. A glass pressed over the air. Jamie edged around the grave until he stood opposite me. I didn't take my eyes off the headboard. I know how easy it is to imagine a thing and then see it. I kept telling myself that while my body had already decided the singer was standing at the foot of the grave, with their head tilted, the way my dad sometimes tilted his when he tried to remember a lyric he hadn't sung in 20 years. "Okay," Jamie said. He pulled a small recorder out of his pocket. He's the kind of guy who always has one, just in case. Let's see if it shows up. He set the recorder on the headboard's top edge where the wood flattened. He pressed the red button. The humming didn't pause, and maybe that detail is nothing, but I noticed it. Every bird I've ever watched stops singing when you point your attention in its direction. Whatever this was had no fear of being listened to. The melody softened. It felt like the singer turned their mouth toward the dirt. The pressure eased and settled as if they'd crouched down. A hair brushed my ear. No, that's wrong. The air moved across my skin as if something had passed between me and the wire fence. It wasn't wind. Wind is general. This was narrow and quiet and aimed. I looked down and saw a nickel on my boot toe, like a coin someone had been rolling across their knuckles and then lost. I still don't know if it was there before and I didn't notice or if it had moved, and what that would even mean. "Don't whistle back," I said. Without deciding to say it, Jamie stepped back from the recorder. He swallowed. The sound had settled into a loop that wanted to be words and never got there. He lifted his tongue the way you do when you're about to match pitch. It's a reflex if you sing even a little. I shook my head hard enough that the brim of my hat cut the air. He didn't whistle, and I'm grateful for that in a way that makes me feel ridiculous and superstitious and very alive. The light slipped. The first real piece of night arrived. I felt my phone buzz against my leg and didn't check it, because there wasn't room in my body for more input. The hum went flat just for a second and then resolved like a person finding their footing. It eased quieter. It moved away, the pressure lifting like someone standing up and stepping back. It didn't cut off. It just walked into the sound of evening and was gone. We stood there until the sky turned blue-black and the mesquite became shadows with edges. Jamie picked up the recorder and checked the timestamp. "Got it," he said. "If it's there, then it's there." On the way back to the gate, we found it locked. That moment was so stupidly predictable that we laughed, both of us louder than we needed to. Cal stepped out from the office shack as if he'd been standing just inside the door. He had the keys ready. "Forgot you boys were up there," he said, and I believed him. "You ever hear it yourself?" I asked. He slid the key into the padlock and tipped his head sideways like people do when they're lining up a thing they can do without looking. "First week I worked here," he said. "Haven't stayed after since." He looked at me and I was sure for a second he was going to ask a question about my dad. He didn't. He pushed the gate open. Put your recorder away till you're off the hill. At dinner, we played the file. The restaurant was half full and plates clacked and someone laughed until they wheezed. And still the hum rose out of the tiny speaker like breath fog on glass. The melody matched what we'd heard, but there were gaps. Breaks that weren't breaks. Little holes like something had been there and was now not. Like the recorder had swallowed a sound that didn't agree with it. "It's there," Jamie said. He looked pleased and sick at the same time. "It's really there. You'll upload it?" I asked. He said he would, but he didn't, not for days, and by then neither of us thought it was a good idea. That change will make sense in a minute. We stayed in a motel with carpets that had been shampooed with too much soap. I woke around 2 to an old song climbing the wall through the air conditioner. It was faint. I only caught a few lines of the tune before it flattened into the fan's churn. It wasn't somebody next door playing music. It was the same shape the hum had worn. I lay there and counted my breaths and told myself I was dreaming, and then found I could not remember whether I'd already been awake when the sound began. That detail bothers me more than anything else. Knowing when a thing begins is important. It gives you a place to pick it up with your hands. In the morning, we went back to Boot Hill before the gate opened. Cal was sweeping dust off the boards. The light was good in that crisp way it sometimes is after a desert night. We gave him coffee. He didn't ask us questions. He told me the county archives might have something on the unknown buried in the back row. He said if I wanted to chase a trail, that's where it would start. I hadn't said out loud that I wanted to, but I did. The county office was 2 rooms with a fan and a woman named Ruth, who could look like your favorite aunt or a judge depending on the angle you caught. She brought out a ledger with columns drawn by hand, tiny neat names, and next to the names, causes of death: shot, hanged, exposure. Next to unknown were notes like a stranger's shrug, found near, assumed wearing. One entry had an extra line squeezed in the margin in a different pen. It read, "Hummed trail verses at time of burial." I didn't point it out to Ruth because I didn't want to hear her say what she'd say, which would be something like, "Now who do you think added that later as a joke?" "Why do you want to know?" she asked instead, like she didn't mean it in a bureaucratic way but in a human way that deserved a human answer. "I heard something," I said. "A song. My dad used to sing it." Or hum it. She didn't look surprised. She pinched the bridge of her nose and then looked past me at the far wall where a calendar hung 6 months behind. "My granddad used to say, place like this, what you bring with you matters more than what's already here," she said. Some spots make that worse, or better, depending on your aunt's church. On our last day, we went back to the grave at sundown because of course we did. I brought nothing with me. No recorder. No camera, no coins. I was careful to not step on the mounds, careful in a way that felt like talking with my feet. The hum came quicker, as if we were expected. It didn't ease in from the fence. It began at the headboard, like someone bowed their head to the wood and exhaled. I felt it in the hollow of my throat, a sympathetic vibration. Jamie took 1 step back. He didn't say he was stepping back. I didn't admit I wanted to look over my shoulder. The melody rose and stopped the way a person rehearses a phrase they can't quite remember. It made my mouth water the way a good smell does. I thought insistently of my dad humming while he taught me how to tie a fishing knot. It was the exact note shape, 2 up, 1 hang, fall. "Hey," I said because there was a strange thing inside me that believed the sound would hear me. "Thanks for—" I didn't know what I was thanking for. For not being alone, for choosing to hum rather than wail, for pulling something out of my childhood and making it present in the dirt. The words felt wrong and too big and I shut my mouth. I heard right behind my right ear the last syllable of my name. Not the whole thing. Not even the first. Just the tail of it. The piece that matters less except to people who love you. That's how my dad used to call me when I was out in the yard and pretended I couldn't hear him. He'd stretch the last part a half inch, the sound playful and annoyed in equal measure. I jerked, and my hat fell forward and I caught it against my chest the way you do when you surprise yourself and want to pretend you meant to. "Okay," Jamie said, and there was a folded panic in that word. "We should go." The hum held a note long enough that I thought absurdly about how lungs work, about how there is only so much air a chest can hold, no matter when or where you lived. Nobody can breathe forever. The note didn't wobble. It was unbroken and human and not human. It threaded thin into the air until I couldn't tell if I was still hearing it or just remembering the shape from 1 second to the next. I wanted to ask for a name. I wanted to kneel in the dirt where the coins made a constellation and say, "Tell me your name." I thought, if I can keep the melody in my head long enough to match it to lyrics later, I'll have something that belongs to both of us. The thought felt greedy. I kept my hands in my pockets and felt my fingers press the seams. The hum ended. It didn't taper. It closed like a book. We left. Cal didn't ask us anything when we passed the gate and said we'd be heading back to Tucson. The road out glittered in the way roads do when gravel has learned how to reflect. I didn't look in the rear view because I didn't want to see what I was afraid I would see, which was nothing at all. Jamie stayed the night in Tucson and then drove home toward Phoenix in the morning. I flew back to Dallas because that's where the airport would take me, and because the world doesn't care if you heard a song in the ground. It still expects you at your desk on Monday. I told myself I'd let it go. I told myself I'd had an experience that didn't need to be labeled. That's what people say when they want to sound above needing, and it's a lie. I wanted more. It showed up in small ways first. I called my mom, and when she answered, she said, "Who is this?" in a way that wasn't a joke. She apologized immediately and blamed her phone. My boss, a woman I've worked with for 5 years, introduced me at a meeting and stalled on my name. She made a joke out of it and said she needed more coffee. But the pause had a weight that set something cold down behind my ribs. At a coffee shop, I paid with a debit card and the receipt printed with name unknown above the total. The barista laughed and said their system was haunted and took a picture for Instagram. I didn't think it was funny. Little things, right? Easy to chalk up to glitches and tired brains. You can build a whole rational life on the word glitch. Jamie texted me a few days later and said, "You ever feel like a word is on the tip of your tongue and then it's gone and what's left is the shape of it?" I said I did. He didn't answer. He usually peppers conversations with gifs and too many exclamation points. He stopped doing that. When I called, it went to voicemail without ringing. The message said his box wasn't set up yet, which is weird for a person who has left you 40 voicemails in the past year complaining about minor traffic events. I went back through the recorder file on my laptop. I hadn't wanted to, but now I did, with the same irresponsible interest that makes you pick at a scab. The hum sat there obediently in the waveform. I listened late at night with the lights off because apparently I wanted to make it worse. In the last 30 seconds of the file, a second sound braided through. I hadn't heard it in the restaurant where plates clacked. It was faint, like a voice caught at the edge of a breath. I played it again. I couldn't tell if the voice used words. I couldn't even tell if it was a voice. The more I listened, the more I felt an animal part of my brain pull away, the way a horse leans back against a bit to avoid something on the ground. I mailed the coin. That sounds ridiculous in print, but I didn't know what else to do. The nickel that had been on my boot, I'd put it in my pocket without thinking. I wrote a note to Cal and apologized for what I called borrowing luck. I asked him to put the coin back on the grave if he didn't mind. I didn't tell him about the name thing or the recorder or the receipt. I didn't want to hand him any of it. I wanted to hand it back to the dirt. A week later, a letter came from Ruth at the county office, not Cal. The envelope had my address written in neat block printing and no return. Inside was a photocopy of the ledger page I'd looked at, the one with the margin note. A yellow sticky note was stuck to it. On the note, in the same handwriting as the label, said, "The margin line wasn't there last year." No greeting, no signature, just that small offering. And I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the paper until the ice in my glass melted. I haven't gone back. I think about it. When my dad died, we didn't have a grave for him. Not the kind you can pour yourself onto and talk to the dirt. He wanted his ashes scattered on a scrub hill behind our house where the ground had been poor for anything but mesquite. On good days, that feels like freedom. On bad days, it feels like misplacing a person. There's a mean little itch in my chest that says I could take a name like a dropped coin and lay it where it could be kept. The itch makes me feel like a thief. Sometimes, late, when my apartment is the kind of quiet that has edges, I hear the beginning of the tune in the grind of the refrigerator motor. It's never the whole thing. It's 3 notes climbing, a breath, then a phrase that could be nothing, could be memory. I hold my breath without meaning to and listen, and the longer I listen, the more I realize I'm not trying to hear words. I'm waiting for the last piece of my name the way my dad used to call me. I want to hear it so badly that I'm not sure what I'd do if I did. I don't whistle. I make that a rule. There are a lot of rules that feel silly until you feel the wind change in a closed room. I'm writing this because there's a chance somebody sees themselves in what I'm describing. Maybe you went to a place where people are reduced to unknown, and something inside you wanted to patch that blank. Maybe you brought a song with you and left with it changed. Maybe it left with a piece of you. If you go to Boot Hill, don't stay past sundown. If you stay, don't bring a recorder. If you bring one, don't put it on the wood. If you put it there, don't listen alone. If you listen alone, don't whistle back. People ask me what the humming wanted. I don't know. If it wanted fear, it could have taken it in handfuls. If it wanted company, it had us. If it wanted a name, it came close to getting one, and maybe it did, a little. The worst answer is that it wanted nothing. That it was just a sound that knows how to find the shape of the thing you miss and wear it until you can't tell the difference. Last week, the barista wrote unknown on my paper cup without asking for my name. She laughed when she handed it over and apologized like it was a joke she'd tell anyone. I took the cup and said it was fine. It was. The coffee was hot. I put $1 in the tip jar. A song hung in my throat, one I promised myself I wouldn't give air to. On the way out, the glass door hummed a little as it shut. A soft vibration I felt in my teeth. 3 notes climbing. I didn't look back to see if anyone else heard it. The door closed. The air held. My name felt steady for the rest of the day, a coin in a palm, warm from skin where it belonged. I don't usually scare easy. I'm the person who chooses the oldest staircase in a condemned hotel because the elevator feels too safe. For the last 5 years, I've filmed little investigative videos about haunted places around the Midwest. YouTube comments say I over-explain. They also say I fake stuff. For the record, I don't fake anything. I've cut footage when someone's safety was on the line, but I've never added a knock or a whisper. Until this spring, the most I could show was weird audio, a moving shadow twice, and a door that closed by itself. Then I went to Bachelor's Grove Cemetery outside Chicago, and I recorded something I don't know how to handle. It was early April, a week after the last snow had melted into a cold mud that clung to boots and car mats. My partner on most shoots is Mara. She's the calm one, the person who can be standing in ankle-deep water while a shelter of mosquitoes forms around her head and still say she's fine. We've done asylums, an old opera house, a farmhouse where every window had been boarded up from the inside. Our third for this one was Luis, a friend of mine from college who does sound design. He asked to tag along to test a new field recorder that he swore could pick up a pin drop from 20 yards away if you held your breath. If you don't know Bachelor's Grove, it's a small cemetery tucked behind the woods near a quiet road. You park at a forest preserve lot and walk in on a dirt path, and then it appears through the trees. This little square of ground with crooked stones and a chain-link fence that looks like it was set there to protect something nobody wanted to admit needed protecting. People say there used to be more stones, but vandals took them or threw them in the pond nearby. They say there's a phantom car that drives the old road, or a house that only shows up when you're not trying to film it. People say a lot of things. The only detail that mattered that day was what someone had sent me by email with grainy photos attached. A patch of ground at the south end of the cemetery that looked like the beginning of an open grave. Not a sinkhole, not a hole dug by animals. It looked purposeful, a neat rectangle of soil that had slumped in by a foot or so. The guy said he'd been there 3 nights in a row walking his dog, and he swore the hole was deeper each time. The last line of the email said, "It sounds like breathing. We got there on a Wednesday around 4. The sky was flat and white. A few joggers passed on the trail and glanced at our tripod like we were doing a class project. I filmed my intro at the gate. The broken stones, the thick trees, the soft mud. I said why we were there and what we were going to do. Mara did a slow pan with the B camera while Luis tested his mics. He had the fancy recorder, a small shotgun mic and 2 lavs just in case. He put one on me and one on Mara. When he tried to clip a third on himself, it fell into the grass and he groaned so loud a woman walking by laughed. "Careful," she said. "It eats things." We smiled back like we didn't want to admit that sentence bothered us. We started in daylight. I like having an establishing shot. The normal look of a place before night turns every bush into a person. We found the email spot fast. South end near a fallen tree. The hole was there like the guy said. It wasn't dramatic. If you showed it to a geologist, they'd probably say it looked like a soft collapse. What made me pause was the way the edges cleaved straight down for a few inches before sloping. It was almost like someone had started to cut a neat grave-sized rectangle with a spade, changed their mind, and then gravity did the rest. The ground around it was disturbed too. Not messy, but a little churned, as if there had been weight there, as if someone had knelt for a long time. Mara crouched near the edge and pointed at something. Boot prints, she said. There were faint edges where someone had stood. No tread pattern I could make out. I held my mic toward the hole and listened. I didn't expect to hear anything. It was 4 in the afternoon, and the wind in the trees made constant white noise. But I heard something anyway. It wasn't breathing. It was air moving like a thready draft through a bottle. In and out, barely there, keeping time with nothing I could feel. My jacket's zipper tag ticked against the mic cable. I reached to hold it still, and in that second, the air sound stopped. I looked at Mara. She looked at me and shook her head like she hadn't moved. When I let the tag go, the sound started again. It's the mic, Louis said. He was already switching the shotgun to a lower gain. It's picking up ambient movement. That's what you're hearing. He was right to be skeptical. I've ruined hours of footage with wind that sounded like whispers. But when we set the recorder at the lip of the hole and backed off, we still heard it. Slow, steady, a thin inhale-exhale. We tried different positions. Same thing. We tried it at other spots around the cemetery to compare. Nothing. Only that hole made the sound. Luis looked at me in a way he hadn't before, which I later realized was concentration lined with curiosity. Give it time, he said. Let's do the loop and come back. We did a standard walk around. A couple in their late 50s stood by a small stone near the center and held hands like they were visiting a relative. 2 teenagers with hoodies too thin for the weather smoked at the fence and told us they saw red eyes in the woods last October. A jogger cut across the edge of the grounds and asked if we had a spare water. We didn't, and I felt weird about that as he ran on because something in the balance of give and take felt off. I'm not superstitious, but there are days when not offering a stranger water feels like a thing that matters. By 6, the light went blue. We set up 2 static cameras facing the hole and 1 wide on the area with a small LED panel diffused low, so it wouldn't look like a crime scene. Luis placed the recorder at the edge, set to run continuously, and then put a second small recorder a few feet away as a control. He showed me the levels. The little green bars rose and fell like a sleeping heart. You're seeing wind, he said, but he didn't sound convinced. We stayed quiet for a long time. If you've never sat still in a place like that, it's not like horror movies. It's boredom wrapped around small noises your brain keeps filing and forgetting. By 8, it was dark enough that sound replaced distance. We could hear the creak, the occasional car on the road, the fabric of Mara's jacket when she shifted, and under that, the steady air sound from the hole. When it slowed, we noticed because we'd gotten used to its timing. When it sped up, all of us looked at each other. Luis frowned at the levels. He said they were trending down over time, which meant if it was wind, it was strangely consistent in losing strength. Right after 9, a ranger came by. He wasn't really a ranger, more like a forest preserve officer, and he was polite in that tired way of someone who has said the same sentences forever. He reminded us the preserve officially closed at sunset. I played the card I hate playing and told him I had permits to film in forest preserves. That was true in a general way, not necessarily for this exact spot. He asked to see the paperwork, and I gave him copies I keep in my bag. He glanced at them, nodded, and told us to be careful going out. He left footprints near the hole that looked like ours. When he disappeared into the trees, the breath sound got louder. It wasn't my imagination. Luis squinted at the recorder like it had offended him. "You're hearing that," he said. "I'm hearing that." He tapped the casing. The bars jumped, settled, and then the sound continued on the new higher plateau like nothing had changed. Mara took the EMF reader out because she's stubborn about her toolbox. I make fun of it, but I also let her run it because sometimes it gives us a simple baseline. No spikes, no stories. It stayed flat for 20 minutes. Then as she passed it over the ground next to the hole, it clicked up slowly. 1 light, then 2, then 3. "Underground cable?" she said. "There's nothing here," I said. She shrugged and kept moving. When she held it over the hole itself, everything went dead. The reader didn't spike. It powered off. She clicked it on again and nothing happened. Later, when she tried it at the car, it worked fine. At 10, we decided to try something I've tried before with no results. Call and response. I don't do "Is anyone here?" in an old-timey TV voice. I usually go with something like, "If there's a person connected to this place who can hear me, I'm here to listen." I said that into the dark, and it felt dumb, and I hated that it felt dumb. And while I was wrestling with the embarrassment of talking to nothing, I realized the air sound was matching me. When I spoke, it paused, and when I stopped, it breathed in and out like it was waiting its turn. "Do you hear that?" Mara whispered. Her voice made a small echo in the phone screen where she monitored the wide shot. Luis held up a finger like a conductor telling an orchestra to be ready. And in the silence that followed, it took a slow breath in that sounded like it went on too long for something without a mouth. We sat like that for an hour, nobody saying anything, the hole breathing as if that were its job. Then something happened that I still can't file anywhere. It wasn't visual. It was plain and simple and small. The hole exhaled, and with it came a warm draft, just a shift in air that touched our faces. The night had been cold up to that point. My nose ached. The skin on my hands felt tight. The air that blew out of that hole was room temperature. Not hot, not foul. It smelled like dry paper. It hit my mouth, and for a second I tasted attic dust and the faint sweetness of something stored too long. Luis glanced at me with a look I'd never seen on him. He's all edges and jokes usually, but his eyes were wider than I thought they could get. "That's not wind," he said, and his voice sounded too loud. We pulled back without saying we were pulling back. Mara moved her bag behind her. I shifted the tripod an inch for no reason. Luis checked the time. 10:41, he said, because someone had to mark it in a way that felt like control. We listened to the next inhale. It drew in for 7 seconds. I counted because it felt like numbers could anchor me. When it exhaled again, the warm air rolled over the ground like a tide you couldn't see. The grass along the lip bent just a little, blades bowing, and then straightened as it pulled back in. "Maybe there's a vent under there," I said. "Old pipe." "Old everything," nobody agreed. We didn't disagree either. We just stood there locked into waiting for a sound to prove what sound never proves. Near 11, the couple we'd seen earlier came back by. The man waved. The woman didn't. They didn't come close to where we were. They stopped at the gate and looked in like they were deciding whether to enter someone's yard. Then they turned and left. A low fog started to gather in the dips of the ground. The breath didn't make fog move. It didn't show itself. It only kept its even pace like the lungs of a sleeping thing. At 11:28, the hole inhaled and the sound didn't end. It kept going. 10 seconds, 12, 15. I felt my own lungs climb toward the urge to join it, and I had to force myself to exhale. "Don't mirror it," Mara said softly. "Breathe your own." I let air out. It felt wrong to do it out loud. The hole kept pulling air. The grass didn't bend. My hair didn't move. We were in the middle of a long inhale that wasn't touching the world, and then it stopped the way a person stops when they remember they left something on the stove. The release came fast and strong, not a blast, but a decisive push. It beat against my chest like a hand. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A shadow in the LED panel diffused glow. I turned my head slowly because I didn't want to see anything lurch or scuttle. What I saw was a depression appear for a second in the earth about 2 feet from the hole, like someone had put their palm down hard and lifted it. It was quick. It could have been a trick of light. It could have been my brain trying to give this an arm and a hand because hands make sense in a way breaths don't. Luis said my name. He didn't sound like he was calling me. He sounded like he was making sure I was real. "We're getting this," he said. It didn't sound like a question. His recorder's red light blinked steady. The little green bars went up and down with the inhale and exhale in a way that looked intentional. I wanted to end the night on our terms. I told the recorder who we were and where we were and that we were going to leave the device running for 15 minutes. I said we'd collect it on our way out. That was to leave a tag, so if anything happened in that 15 minutes, anyone who heard it later would know we weren't there. We backed away. The breath kept going. Every few steps I looked down at my boots because the ground is uneven there and I didn't want to fall. When we were near the gate, I turned back. The hole was just a dark rectangle in a darker patch, the LED soft and even. It took one more slow inhale. As we reached the path, someone stepped out from the trees. I nearly swung the tripod up out of reflex before I made out the shape. An older woman, gray hair and a low braid, coat that was too thin for the cold, boots caked in mud. She held a plastic grocery bag in one hand. Her face was lined deep, not with age so much as with the kind of weather that marks you. I think I've seen her type 100 times in places like this. Locals who walk these trails at all hours, who know the creek when it's frozen and when it's a thin thread in drought. "It's full again," she said. Her voice was low and even. It took a beat for me to understand she was talking to us. "Excuse me," I said, because the sentence she had dropped felt like stepping into a conversation already moving. "The grave," she said. "It filled this morning. You stay long enough, it empties at night. It's full again at dawn, like the tide." Mara glanced at me. I went into interviewer mode because that's the only way I know to talk to strangers quickly. "Have you seen that happen?" I asked. "I don't look," she said. "I listen. You can hear it better from the path. The wind up there lies to you." She checked our faces like we were students she might give up on. "He died working the land. He wasn't done." "Who?" I said, and I hated the dumbness of the question. She raised her chin toward the dark. "Them, all of them. You think it's one, you're wrong. Who do you think keeps the ground soft? Used to be the men kept the plots. Now nobody does. So they do." I tried to decide if we were being messed with. Her expression didn't change. She was either someone who told stories to startle people for fun, or someone who lived near the edge of this place and understood its jokes. "Did you know the person buried there?" I asked. "Not buried," she said. "He didn't make it here. They pulled him from the creek and put him on the cart. It broke a wheel on the road, and by then the ground was hard and nobody wanted to dig. They took him home and kept him under the table till spring. He never liked a roof." The way she said it made me feel a draft in my bones, like it had gone right through my coat. "How long ago?" Louise asked, surprising me. He doesn't usually get into the talk. His voice was careful, like he was working with a skittish cat. She looked at him and shook her head once, like that was the wrong measure. "You should go," she said. "Take your machines. Don't leave them here overnight. It gets into them. It breathes through them if you let it." I tried to ask something else, but she had already stepped off the path. The trees took her without sound. We stood until our breath made little clouds. Somewhere behind us, the recorder blinked its steady red. We went back. Quiet. No jokes. We moved like the air had weight. The LED panel glow marked the spot like a candle in a window. The breath was still going, slow and steady, and this time I could hear a faint shift under it, like an undertone of liquid moving through tight spaces. I reached for the recorder and hesitated a second because the plastic casing was damp with condensation. I wiped it on my jacket. The screen showed it had been running. "Anything?" Mara asked. "We'll know in the car," Louis said. His voice had the clipped efficiency he uses when his hands know a task and his brain is somewhere else. We packed fast. I did a last pan with the B camera because I needed to feel like I knew how to do at least one thing right. The hole inhaled one more time, and on the exhale, a very soft, very brief sound came up through the recorder, not a voice. A plain human motion stretched thin. The sound of someone moving their tongue off the roof of their mouth to speak. In the parking lot under the yellow light, we listened. The car heater blew gritty air, and the recorder sat on the dash like a patient. Luis transferred the file to his laptop, and we watched the waveform stretch into blue and black. We scrubbed at 10:41. The levels looked like a slow wave. When the long inhale began, it built smooth and then held. The hold lasted 22 seconds. We had counted less. On the release, the sound was louder than I remembered. The car speakers made it bigger, a large person breathing close to a mic in a quiet room. We listened to that for 2 minutes without talking, because something in being in the car made listening safe. Then we scrubbed to the end. We found the last exhale in the small, almost voice sound. Luis looped 2 seconds around it. My stomach tightened when it came again and again out of the speakers, because hearing something that wants to be a word but isn't might be the worst sound I've ever heard. "Play it slower," Mara said. Luis did. The slowed version removed the human shape. It was just a smear of mouth noise. He played it faster. It became a little sharper, like the beginning of a consonant. We stopped because I couldn't listen to that hope and not hope, that brain trying to make letters feeling. We drove home. I dropped Mara off first because her apartment was on the way. She hugged me longer than usual at the curb. "Tomorrow," she said, which was our way of saying we didn't need to talk until we did. I drove Luis to his place, and he took the recorder with him. He said he wanted to dump the files right away and make backups. He texted me 20 minutes later, "You need to see this." I was already home with my shoes by the door and my coat hanging open in the kitchen like a person waiting to say something. I didn't want to go back out. He sent a screenshot. It was the file info window for the main recorder file. The creation time said 5:18 a.m. The modification time said 6:02 a.m. The capture had ended at 11:53 p.m. according to the timer. His laptop clock was correct. The camera files had normal times. The small backup recorder file had normal times. Only the main file acted like it had been made early that morning and touched again around dawn. Glitch, I texted back because my brain needed the word. He sent a second text. The end of the file has more. It's faint. Come hear it on the good monitors. I sat at my kitchen table looking at a glass I hadn't washed and thinking about warm air. I told myself I could hear it tomorrow and then thought about the woman's sentence getting into machines and felt dumb for giving that sentence power. I drove over. Luis's studio is a room in his basement with soundproofing foam that makes it look like he lives inside an egg carton. He had the file up on the largest screen. He didn't say hello. He hit play. He'd boosted the last minute with his tools. The breath was present, steady, unhurried. He let it run to the final exhale and the almost voice. Then there was a very short gap, a half-second of flatline. After that, something so quiet I had to lean forward even with the speakers at a level that made my throat feel the sound. It wasn't words. It wasn't a moan. It was the small private sound a tired person makes when they finally sit down and the chair takes their weight. We sat in silence a long time. The file ran out. Luis looped it and we heard that weight settle again and again until I wanted to crawl out of my skin. Could be handling noise, he said finally in a way that begged me to agree. Like we picked it up and jostled it. We picked it up after it, I said. On the file there's a gap. And the timestamp. He rubbed his hands over his face. We're missing a chunk, he said. Or it wrote wrong, or I don't know. He shook his head hard enough that his glasses slid a little. I don't know. We decided to go back in the morning because the only way to make any of it sit still in my mind was to do something with my feet on the ground. Mara met us at the lot at 6:30 with a thermos of coffee. The morning was bright and brittle. The mud had crusted on top. We walked in fast, 3 shadows moving toward last night. At the south end, the hole was filled. Not smoothed, not tamped, just full. The rectangle was level with the ground around it, a tiny bit domed. The LED panel we'd left low on the stand had fallen inward a few inches and half buried its corner. We hadn't left it that close. The grass where I had seen the depression was pressed down flat, like something had laid there and kept its shape. Luis set the recorder where we'd had it and turned it on. We heard nothing but morning birds and the distant hiss of cars. No breath, just air that didn't argue. We stood a long time. People came through. A man with a metal detector at the fence nodded to us like we were regulars. The couple from last night wasn't there. The old woman wasn't there. The ranger didn't show. Around 8, a group of 3 kids in matching hoodies came in with fast voices and walked the perimeter. And one of them pointed at our spot and said, "It's this one." And they all looked for a second and then kept going. I wanted to stop them and ask what they knew, but I didn't. It felt like interjecting into a river. When the sun was high enough that everything looked like a place again, we packed up. The recorder had a clean file. Birds, our steps, the occasional plane overhead. At the gate, I turned and looked back one last time. The filled ground looked like every other filled ground. I wanted it to be a story about wind and a hole in my brain. That version would be easy to manage. I told myself I'd edit the footage with care and not rush it, and I would not claim more than I had. The first night after we got home, I slept with my window cracked because my apartment gets stuffy. I woke a little after 3 because of a sound. It took me a minute to place it. It wasn't the radiator ping. It wasn't a neighbor's music. It was low and steady, a soft movement of air in the room. I sat up expecting the usual spike of adrenaline. It didn't come. The sound matched my breathing at first, then it didn't. It slid into a pace that wasn't mine. I held my hand in front of my face and felt nothing. I stood and it stayed at the same volume, which meant it wasn't near or far. It was present. After a minute it paused and I did too. Because this is the dumb thing we do when we think someone is listening. After the pause there was a faint shift like a person adjusting in a chair you can't see. I stood a long time, an hour maybe, because time at night becomes a convincing liar. When it ended like someone making a decision. In the morning I recorded my wrap-up for the video. I kept it simple. I said that sometimes the worst thing to bring home from a place isn't an attachment or a bruise or a voice. Sometimes it's a perfectly ordinary noise that won't admit where it came from. I didn't include the bedroom audio. I didn't include the timestamp screenshot. I didn't include the old woman's sentence about machines. I kept the piece clean because I wanted to sleep again someday. The upload did fine. The comments did their usual push and pull. People heard the breath and said we faked it. People heard the breath and said they heard words in it. People asked about the couple, the ranger, the woman. Someone said their grandfather's grave used to rise in winter and sink in summer. Someone else said ground breath is a known thing in certain soils. Louis sent me a link to an article about air exchange in underground cavities. I sent back a thumbs up. Neither of us mentioned the file times again. A week later, a small package showed up at my door with no return address. Inside was a plastic grocery bag that smelled faintly like old cold air. Wrapped in that was a cassette tape and a sticky note that said, "From the Path." I don't own a cassette player. I asked Luis and he dug one out of his closet that he uses to sample odd sounds. We sat in his studio and hit play. The tape hissed and then settled. On it, a steady breath like ours, like the file, but thinner, as if recorded from outside the fence. 15 minutes in, the breath paused. The hiss filled the gap. After the pause, there was a sound so small most people would delete it without listening twice. It was the sound of someone putting their palm down on ground, pressing to stand and then not standing after all. We looked at each other and then at the tape as if it might say more if we stared hard enough. I put the cassette back in the bag and wrapped it tight and sealed it in a box and put that box in the back of my bedroom closet, behind a crate of winter clothes. I'm not a superstitious person. I'm not. But sometimes when the heat kicks off at night, I wake and count without meaning to. 10 seconds, 12, 15. I tell myself to keep my own rhythm. I tell myself to breathe my own. And most mornings the apartment smells faintly like old paper, and the glass on my table has a ring in it that wasn't there the night before. Like someone set a cup down and considered staying. I open the window and the air moves and the smell goes. On my desk, the SD card from that night sits in a drawer. I haven't listened to the raw file again. I don't think playing it would change anything. If places keep their own cycles, then sometimes all you can do is keep yours. But there are days when I walk past a construction site and hear the backhoe scoop out a clean rectangle, and I feel my chest tighten. Not with fear exactly, but with the heavy patience of something that knows how to fill and empty, until the person watching forgets which way is the one that ends. I don't usually tell people this part of my life because it sounds like I'm trying to make a story out of a bad night. But I need it out of my head, and maybe writing it down is the only way I can stop hearing the water in places where there shouldn't be water. This happened in Los Angeles last winter, during one of those heavy rains that turned the gutters on Santa Monica Boulevard into thin rivers. I was working a freelance job near Paramount, a production office that was doing a night shoot and needed a PA to babysit equipment while they shuffled permits. The office was 2 blocks from Hollywood Forever Cemetery. We wrapped early when the rain started pounding, and the shoot lead announced they'd pick it up in the morning, weather permitting. My car was parked on the other side of the cemetery, and I didn't feel like walking the long way around in the storm. I'd cut through Hollywood Forever a dozen times on normal days. The gates close at sunset, but there's an overnight security booth, and if you explain you parked near the other entrance, they'll usually let you pass to the lot by the Santa Monica gate. My friend Mia knew one of the guards and had shown me the shortcut along the little lake with the leaning palms and the noisy birds. It saves you 15 minutes if you keep your head down and don't try to sightsee. I pulled my hood tight and crossed at Van Ness. The rain came down in diagonal lines that felt like thumbtacks hitting my cheeks. The guard shack was lit, yellow and warm, and a stocky guy in a navy jacket pushed the window open when he saw me jogging up. His name was Raphael. I only know that because I read the stitched patch while I tried to look harmless. Closed, he said, but not unkindly. I know. I parked at the Santa Monica lot. I was working over on Gordon Street. I can show you my badge, the production rented spaces this morning. He looked me up and down, soaked jeans, messenger bag under my jacket, sopping hair, and waved me in. Stick to the road. Don't go near the graves. People get weird in the rain. I just need to get to my car, I swear. He pushed a clipboard toward me. Sign your name and cell. If you slip and crack your head, at least I know who to call. I signed. He leaned out of the window as I started away. If it gets bad, there's the Abbey of the Psalms mausoleum on your left. Doors sometimes stay unlocked. Don't tell anyone I told you that. Got it, I said, and I meant it. The rain flared off the pavement like steam. The thing about cemeteries and storms is they don't feel peaceful. The trees shake and argue with the wind. The grass swallows the sound of your footsteps and gives it back as a squelch with a half-second delay. The peacocks that strut around Hollywood forever during sunsets had vanished, but I could hear something like wings moving in the palms. Water sheeted off the marble angels and trickled down the faces like veins. I passed the lake and the low stone bridge. The rain punched the water hard enough that it looked alive, every drop the tip of a needle. I kept my eyes on the road. The Abbey of the Psalms rose on my left, a long building with small high windows and a door framed in green copper. I might have kept moving if the wind hadn't shoved me sideways. It came in a sudden gust that carried grit, and for a moment I tasted the manicured dirt that's always on your clothes after you've brushed against a grave border. The gust took my breath and bounced my bag against my hip. When I grabbed for it, I lost my balance on a slick patch and went down on one knee. There's a point where being wet crosses into being stupid. Kneeling in the road with rain going inside my sleeves, I admitted I wasn't going to make it the rest of the way without a break. I sprinted the few steps to the mausoleum and tried the handle like Raphael had said. It turned easily. Thick air pushed at me from inside, cool in a way that suggested stone more than temperature. I slipped in and pulled the heavy door closed until it caught. Not fully latched, but resting in a way that dampened the pounding storm to a low, constant hiss. The mausoleum smelled like old pennies and furniture polish. A single motion light blinked on in the entryway, buzzing faintly. The floor was polished marble, a pale gray with veins of darker stone running through it like smoke. To my right and left, dark corridors lined with small brass-fronted crypts vanished into the dim. The ceiling arched and trapped the hive sound of the light. I stood there, catching my breath. I checked my phone, 1 bar. The screen had water inside somewhere. The touch response ignored half my thumb. I took a slow lap of the entry hall, pretending I was just wasting a minute getting a little drier. My shoes left clear prints, dark like damp footprints always are on light floors. It took me longer than it should have to notice my footprints had company. At first I figured they were mine doubled back, but the stride was wrong. These prints were slightly smaller than my own, closer together, and there were more of them than I could account for in the short loop I'd just made. They came from the deeper corridor, the one to the left, and crossed the entry in a lazy arc as if someone had wandered through and then paused near the door where I stood. And then they continued back the way they came. The more I stared, the less they made sense, like they were walking over and over a pattern I couldn't see. "Hello?" I said, because we all say the dumb movie word first. Sound behaved oddly. The hiss of rain through the door seemed equal to my voice, like the building weighed my words in one hand and the weather in the other, and chose not to decide which was more important. No answer came from the corridor. Somewhere deeper in the building, something ticked once, a metal contraction the way old pipes do when they cool. I told myself someone else had ducked in during the earlier wave of rain and left, or a groundskeeper had done a sweep. But then I glanced at the door and realized the wet prints led inward, from the outside to the corridor. Not out. It's such a simple detail that I felt stupid for missing it. The first print near the door was the wettest, edges sloppy, the toe pointed inward. The last print by the door on the arc back was drier, more of a ghost than a block. The wettest part was where you'd expect someone to come in and stand dripping. Except these didn't pause. They walked past the door toward the inner hall. No corresponding record showed them leaving. I approached the corridor and peered into the long, low light. Motion sensors popped one by one in the ceiling ahead as if acknowledging me. A soft whoop, and a new patch of brightness revealed rows of plaques, flowers and vases, little photos under glass with expressions that were all versions of blank posed calm. "Hey," I tried again. "If someone's in here, I'm just waiting the storm out." A shape moved at the end of the hall. My muscles flinched before I realized it was my reflection in a framed glass photo, catching the motion light from a bad angle. I forced a breath and edged 1 foot ahead. The prints deep in the hall were fresh. They pulled at the lamplight darker than the spaces around them. Toe after heel, toes pointing left now. Some dried into the marble and then reappeared, darker again, as if the source had stepped in a new puddle that didn't exist. The rain outside picked up, a drumming so constant it turned almost oceanic. I listened for voices, for a cough, for the shuffle of shoes. Instead, from somewhere beyond the turn to the left, I heard a sound like a soaked cloth being lifted and then put down, over and over. A dragging pat, pat, pat. I'm not brave. I'm a scheduler with a side hobby of telling myself I'm tough enough to work nights. But the idea of going back to the storm and walking the open road felt worse than taking 10 more steps inside and telling a homeless person or a groundskeeper that I'd be gone in a second. So I followed the prince. The corridor turned left past a small alcove with a bench and a bronze statue of a kneeling woman. Flowers had been placed at her feet in a ring that had toppled, stems bleached where they'd dried. Something glittered on the bench. I thought it might be a broken bottle at first, but it turned out to be water. A thin crescent of water that didn't drip or run, just sat polished and unbroken like a coin glued to the surface. I reached out a finger and touched it. It was cold, and colder where it met my skin. A tiny bite that caused the hairs on my arm to rise. The corridor widened into a chamber with a skylight. The glass above the room was old and bubbled. Rain pebbled down and made the ceiling swim. The prints split here. Some went right toward a side room with a low chain across the entrance. The chain had a sign in small letters. Family room, do not enter. More prints went straight across the chamber to another hall. I don't know what professional instinct made me stop and take a photo. Maybe I wanted proof that it wasn't just my eyes. The shot came out grainy and strange. The wet places reflected the ceiling in little perfect pieces, and all those tiny skylights stitched together made the floor look like it had its own storm trapped in it, raining upward. "Raphael," I said, and suddenly felt an intense need to hear a living voice. I dialed the security shack. The single bar hung on the screen and then winked away. The call didn't even fail. It just spun in place, a tiny whirlpool. I canceled and texted Mia instead. "I'm in the mausoleum. Wet footprints. Tell me I'm being dumb." The little sending wheel circled. The message went gray and then popped under it. Not delivered. The dragging pat came again, closer. I could hear the individual layers of it now. Not just a wet cloth, but something like a bare sole landing and lifting slower than it should, as if each step required thought, as if whoever was walking had to convince their foot to leave the floor with effort. Against the steady rain, the rhythm felt wrong. I couldn't map it to the shape of a person in my head. "Hello?" I tried once more, softer. The answering sound was a breath. Not a human breath exactly. The kind of breath water makes when it gulps down a drain in a steady pull. I saw him in the doorway of the family room where the chain sagged. He was turned away just inside the threshold. He wasn't transparent or glowing or anything theatrical like that. He was a man in a long, dark coat that was darker because it was wet. His hair lay flat on his skull. His hands hung at his sides like tired things. Around his feet, the floor had gone reflective. Water pooled a quarter-inch deep in a perfect rectangle. Edge neatly aligned with the room's threshold as if the room were a shallow basin. He stood in it like it wasn't there. "Hey," I said. "You okay?" Slowly he turned his head and I braced for a face. I got one. It was a normal human face, pale from bad indoor light, a little sallow from bad living. The only wrong part was the eyes. The whites looked dim, not cloudy. More like he'd been underwater for so long that his eyes had learned to prefer it. He glanced down at my shoes and then up to my face. His mouth opened slightly. The sound that came out was like someone remembering how to speak after a long sleep. "You came in." His voice was hoarse and careful. I thought, at first, it was the rain. "It's pouring," I said, feeling stupid again because what else do you say? "You're soaked. Do you want to come back to the entry? There's less wind there." He lifted one foot. The foot rose with an exaggerated reluctance, the sole peeling from the marble with a suction sound. When it set down again, the rectangle of water gave a tiny shiver. He took another step. The chain didn't move, but he was on the wrong side of it now, or maybe the chain was. Perspective seemed to forget itself for a second. "This isn't the entry," he said. "This is the middle." "You don't want the middle?" "I just need to get to my car," I said. "I'll leave as soon as the squall passes." The squall, yes. He glanced toward the chamber's skylight as if it were a screen showing something far away. "Does it end, though?" "Does it?" I realized I was closer to him now than to the door I'd come in. If he did anything weird, I wasn't going to be able to pretend I'd misread it. My legs tensed. "Sir?" I tried to force my voice to sound authoritative the way people do when they want to resolve a situation without committing to it. "There's a security guard. He can help you if you're lost. I can call him." "Raphael," he said, like he was tasting the name and recognizing a flavor. "He doesn't come in when it rains heavy. The batteries die in the radios. The batteries die when it's heavy." He looked at me and tilted his head. "Yours is dying too." I looked at my phone and hated that he was right. It was at 12% now, a number it had no business being at considering I'd been at 70 in the guard booth 2 minutes ago. The battery icon blinked in a way I'd never seen before, like it didn't want to be looked at. "Okay," I said, holding my hands out at hip height the way you do to a dog you want to back off. I'm going to go the way I came. You can stay in there if you want." "Stay," he echoed, but I couldn't tell if he was asking me to or repeating the word to himself as if learning it. I took a step back. The marble under my shoe squealed wet, a clean, innocent sound that almost made me feel better. I took another step and glanced down. The wet footprints I'd followed were shifting. I don't have better words for it. They weren't smearing, not exactly. The toe bent a little toward the place where my heel had been, and the heel curled toward the place where my toe had just left, like the prints were trying to stand back up, like they were being pulled into a position where they could be stepped in again. For a second, I thought the water was running backward, but it wasn't. It was remembering. Something moved to my right. A woman stood in the side corridor, no more than 20 feet away, wearing a dress that had once been white and was now the color of the rain. Her hair clung to her cheeks. Her hands were cupped like she was carrying a small bird. Her eyes were not like his. They were just eyes, very wide, very tired. Behind her, a third person stood. A teenager, maybe. A sweatshirt dark as if dyed. A flat baseball cap slanting wrong because it had been pushed down too low and then swelled with water. Their feet were rimmed in the same thin puddle that framed the family room. The rectangle was no longer just a rectangle. It was on both sides. It seemed to know where they were. I have heard the phrase fight, flight, or freeze 100 times. Freeze finally made sense. My chest forgot how to draw air. My shoulders felt armored by something my body made up on the spot just to hold me in place. I tried to look without looking, to take them in like you take in the edge of a significant drop. The man took a step toward me, and his foot peeled from the marble with that same quiet suction. "We waited for it to pass," he said. "But it doesn't pass, it fills. It fills, and if you stand very still, it will go around you. But you came in. So now it knows your shape." "What knows my shape?" I asked. Which is the sort of thing you say when your brain needs a sentence to declare that it still exists. "This," he said, and gestured to the sheeted sound above, to the glass ceiling where every drop of rain made a small, perfect circle. "This, it watches for openings." A burst of static sounded from my pocket like a radio, even though my phone wasn't on any app. A voice cut through, flattened by interference. "You good?" It sounded like Raphael under a blanket. I yanked the phone out. The screen was black for a second, then showed me his name even though I hadn't saved it. I swiped. "I'm here," I said. "I'm in the mausoleum." "The door," came the voice. "Don't let it close." As if choreographed, a new gust hit outside and made the building breathe, a deep inward push that tugged at the air. The entry door boomed faintly on its hinge where I'd left it resting. I took a step toward the way out. The three figures did not follow. They didn't have to. The wet footprints ahead of me turned and lay down fresh where the old ones had been. A new sequence overlaying the old, not leading away, but realigning. The route I wanted was now the route they wanted too. "Please," the woman said very softly, and I knew she didn't mean please stay or please help us. It sounded like please don't look closely at what I am, which is a kind of mercy. I went forward anyway, because the part of me that still understood that outside was outside and had stars somewhere behind all that weather insisted. I kept my eyes on the end of the hall, on the weak hinge of light that meant the entry. My shoes found their own staccato. The prints beneath me matched and then mismatched and then matched again. The sound of the rain grew louder with each step until it wasn't a sound anymore but a pressure, a hand that wanted to push my head down. That ticking metal sound happened again, nearer. The motion light above me chose the worst possible moment to flicker. In that flicker, the floor in front of me became the lake, just for that frame of time. The marble remembered that it had once been stone near water, and water had covered it, and light had moved through water to draw shadows on the bottom. I stepped into that second like stepping off a curb you didn't see. My knee buckled. My shoulder hit the wall and slid along cold brass nameplates. "Don't let it close," Raphael repeated into my ear. And this time it didn't come from the phone so much as from the air. From the building trying on his voice the way you try on a coat in a store. The door was very clearly closing. I didn't see hands on it. The wind did it, I told myself. The gusts were not consistent, but they were strong enough to push. The slab had swung from barely resting to leaning much harder, and in another inch it would seat in the latch. I pushed off the wall and ran. The prints tried to shape themselves to me, but I didn't give them a rhythm. I put my feet down in a chaos that had nothing to do with running, and everything to do with wanting. The air in the entry was cold and thick. The water sound had a throat. It called the way flood control channels call, the way a big storm drain does when a ball goes in and won't come out. The door's edge skimmed the jamb with a long kiss. I hit it with my palm and shoulder, and the door rebounded with a heavy syllable. Outside, the rain did not look like an invitation, but it was the only thing that wasn't inside, and that mattered more than it should have. I shoved the door wide and stepped into the deluge. The world felt oddly bright, like the sky had turned the dim switch up. I spun to pull the door behind me and paused because I could see the floor perfectly through the gap, and there were 4 sets of wet prints standing still at the threshold, arranged like a family would stand waiting for a photo. The smallest, the teenager's size, rotated slightly at the last second as if considering a weight shift, a half step that never quite committed. "Go," Raphael said next to me. He wasn't next to me. He was 10 yards away under an umbrella, radio in one hand, the other hand waving, but the way he said it sounded like he was in my ear still. "Don't look back again. Don't do that movie thing." I bolted and he held the umbrella over both of us in a clumsy V that walked us toward the road. His radio squawked and someone else's voice asked if all was clear at the Abbey. "Clear," he said and shot a look at me. "You good?" "Yeah," I lied. "Somebody was in there." "Nobody is ever in there when it rains heavy," he said. "Not alive anyway." I tried to laugh and it sounded like choking. We reached the curve of the road and the mausoleum fell behind a stand of palms. The lake whipped in sheets, a white skin pulled sideways. I could feel my heart in my fingertips. Every raindrop hit like a tiny separate fear. "Parking lot is open," he said. "I'll watch till you pull out. Don't be a hero and spin your wheels by the exit. The curb floods and people do dumb things." I promised to be ungallant and practical. He tapped the umbrella twice on my shoulder in a way that felt like a blessing and pulled it back. I jogged the last stretch and found my car under a wreath of cawing crows that had mistaken it for a dry place until they learned it wasn't. I got in, threw the heater on and held the wheel until my hand stopped shaking enough to turn the key. As I pulled around toward the exit, I caught sight of the Abbey one last time. The door had swung closed, or the wind had nudged it, or the world had gotten sick of my line of sight. Either way, it was shut. A memory left a taste in my mouth, metal and bitterness, like the air had gone stale around a thought. I made it home without skidding. I hung my soaked clothes in the bathroom and listened to them drip. My phone had died on the drive, even though it had been at 10% in the lot. And when I plugged it in, the battery icon didn't appear for a long 30 seconds. That felt like someone deciding whether or not to let me have it back. There were 2 texts when it came back. The one I'd sent to Mia finally marked as sent, and her response. It said, "Don't go in there when it rains." Then a second, "Did you go in there when it rains?" I called her. She picked up on the first ring. "Was this tonight?" she asked. "At the Abbey?" "Yeah." "You're fine," she said, but not like a sentence, more like checking an item on a list. "What is it then?" She blew air. They had a flood a few years back. The drains clogged. Some of the rooms filled. It was a whole thing, and they don't like to talk about it because families get upset. But water does weird things in old buildings. My uncle used to work maintenance over there. He said it learns paths. That sounds superstitious. Maybe. He also said never let the door close if you step in during heavy rain. He said that like 4 different times. "You didn't let it close, right?" "No," I said, and tasted the metal again because now it was attached to the memory of how close the latch had come. I didn't. I slept eventually, and in that sleep I dreamed of polished stone and the trick light of a shallow pool. I woke to the hiss of my shower even though I hadn't turned it on. When I pushed the curtain back, it was dry. Just the sound from the rain still in my head, or maybe in the pipes. Life resumed as if it was brave enough to pretend. A week passed. On a bright noon, sun out, air clear, I walked past a storefront window and saw my reflection and took a small step to the left to fix something in my hair. The print my shoe left on the concrete wasn't wet, but it was darker than it should have been for the shadow the angle gave. As I leaned for a better look, it turned just a fraction, like a person rolling over to face you when they've been lying on their side a long time. Another time, a month later, I came home from the grocery store and found a ring of damp on my hallway floor, shaped precisely like the bench alcove at the Abbey, the same crescent of water glistening perfect and still. I put a paper towel on it and it stayed shiny, like the towel didn't matter. I stood there for an embarrassing amount of time asking the apartment to stop. Eventually it went away, absorbed into nothing like nothing had been there. And once 2 nights ago I woke because my phone lit up my room and vibrated once and then stilled. No number, no missed call, just a voicemail that transcribed as blank. When I pressed play I heard the drag of a foot lifting from a wet floor and setting down again. After that, Raphael's voice, "Don't let it close." And then the hiss of rain far away, contained like it had found a room to live in. I haven't cut through Hollywood forever since that night. I walk the long way around even on clear days, even when the peacocks are screaming and the low light makes the palms look like movie set curtains. People ask me why I'm late and I say traffic or I say I tripped on a curb. I don't say the door remembers me. I don't say the water does too, but I know it. In the corner of my eye, every spill tries to look like a rectangle, and every rectangle tries to become a threshold. If you go there when it rains and the guard lets you pass, look up when you stand at the door. If the glass in the ceiling looks deeper than the sky should be, keep walking. Don't be brave. Don't try the inside just to see, because the prince might already be there, learning your stride, and if they learn it well enough, they'll keep walking it long after you leave, until the day you stop at your hallway and realize you've already stepped where you're about to step, and the place you live has learned your shape too. I'm writing this because I don't know where else to put it, and because my phone still sometimes vibrates in the middle of the night even when it's on airplane mode, and when I check there's no notification, just this phantom buzz and the faintest sound in the speaker like metal tapping glass. Maybe this will get it out of my head. Maybe someone in Baltimore has heard the same thing. I'll try to keep it simple and straight the way it happened. I moved to Baltimore 2 summers ago to take a job with a small design firm near Mount Vernon. I rented a second-floor apartment above a barber shop on West Reed Street. It wasn't glamorous, but I could walk everywhere. And most nights, my best friend from college, Marcus, would come by after his shift at the hospital and we'd grab cheap tacos and watch YouTube horror videos until one of us fell asleep. I liked the city right away, especially in that weird way older cities blend noisy blocks with pockets of quiet that feel displaced in time. There's one kind of quiet I didn't know I hated yet, the quiet of graveyards after rain. In September of last year, the week after Labor Day, Marcus told me about the old Western burial ground. He'd been there once on a historical walking tour. "You'd love it," he said. "They've got this whole Poe thing. People leave coins on his grave, you know. But the back part is older. There's a bell out there. Or there was. A bell?" I asked. "Safety coffin," he said, like that explained everything. It kind of did. Back in the 19th century, people worried about being buried alive. Some coffins had tubes up to the surface or ropes that tied to a bell above ground, so if the person woke up, they could ring until someone dug them out. I'd heard about those, but only as trivia. That night, we fell into a rabbit hole reading old articles and Reddit threads about rescue coffins. Some of it sounded like urban legend. The next Saturday turned gray and low like a lid, and the forecast said storms after noon. We decided to go anyway because Marcus only had mornings off. The old Western burial ground sits behind Westminster Hall, hemmed in by brick and iron. We parked on Fayette and slipped through the gate just as the wind picked up the smell of wet leaves and something colder. A maintenance guy was zipping up a canvas bag near the entrance. He had a white beard and those bright blue eyes old men sometimes have. And he watched us the way a lifeguard watches a crowded pool. I asked if the grounds were open. "Until the rain," he said. "You here for Poe?" He had an old Orioles cap turned backward like a joke. "Actually," Marcus said, "we heard about the bell." The man's mouth went flat. "Bell's been gone for years," he said. "Rope rotted, iron cracked. Kids kept messing with it, so the church took the remains into storage." "So there was a bell?" I said. "Like a real safety coffin bell?" "There were a few," he said, then shrugged. "Lots of stories." "I'm keen." He didn't offer a hand. "Don't stay long if it storms. Trees here like to drop surprises." The place felt older than the buildings around it, like the city had grown around this little acre and then stopped. The brick vaults and leaning stones made crooked lines that looked careful in the way accidents sometimes do. Toward the back, near a low wall patched with different colors of brick. We found a marker with a rusted iron stand next to it. The stand had a square plate with holes where bolts had been. I could picture the bell, a small one, maybe like a school bell, suspended from a hook above the grave, the rope slipping down through a pipe to the coffin lid. I crouched and traced the scarred plate with my finger. It was cold. Even though the air felt heavy and warm before the rain, that piece of metal felt like it had been left in snow. "It's creepy with the rope gone," Marcus said, hands in his hoodie pockets. What did it sound like? Like a dinner bell? Or, I don't know. Would you hear that from your bed at night and think, oh yeah, someone needs digging up? We laughed, but it was a thin laugh. A gust rattled the leaves, and for a second I thought I heard a faint metallic ding somewhere behind us. The kind of accidental ring you get when someone taps a railing with a set of keys. I straightened and turned, and there was nothing. Just the wind, the traffic on Green Street, the clink of a chain on the gate at the far end. Then, close to my feet, I heard a tiny bright note. It was clear and quick and exactly what you think of as a bell. "Did you?" I said. "Yeah," he said. That was a ring. We stood there waiting like idiots for another one. It didn't come. The clouds had climbed lower. When the rain started, it was those big "the storm is here" drops that leave perfect dark fingerprints on stone. We hurried back toward the hall, and Keen met us halfway, hurting us with a look. "Come on," he said. "Gates closing." We jogged to the car, both of us quiet. At the light, Marcus said, "Okay, could have been anything. There's metal everywhere. Pipes, signposts. Maybe you kicked something. Maybe there's a wind chime." "Yeah," I said, though I hadn't kicked anything. Still weird. We told ourselves that for a few days and then didn't talk about it. Work got busy. The Ravens were on TV every Sunday. I started seeing someone, a woman named Hannah, who managed a bookstore in Hampton. About 3 weeks later, a storm came through that knocked out power across half the city. It rolled in after midnight. This purple-black sky that flashed white every few seconds. The kind of night that makes you feel like you're inside the weather instead of under it. My windows shook. When the lightning paused, the street went absolutely black and the rain sounded like a crowd. I couldn't sleep, so I scrolled through my phone in bed until the battery warned me. I put it face down and listened. That's when I heard the bell again. It didn't come through the air like a normal sound. It came up thin and far away, like it started inside the floor and then climbed through the building. One bright ring, then another exactly 10 seconds later, then another 10 after that. I counted. 10 seconds is a long time when you're waiting. 3 rings. Then silence long enough for me to think I'd imagined it. Then a 4th ring, this one a little softer, like whoever or whatever was ringing it had to reach farther. I didn't move for a full minute. Rain. Thunder way off. The bell, single and crystal and impossibly clean between everything. I sat up, pulled the curtain, and saw only the wet, reflective street and the dark shape of the church on the corner. My apartment smelled like damp plaster. I got up, found my phone, turned the voice recorder app on, and waited. I caught the next ring, I'm sure of it. Then the power flickered and came back, and the fridge beeped, and the sound vanished like it had been canceled. The next morning, I texted Marcus the audio. He wrote back, "Dude." Then, "Could be the building heating up? Radiators ping?" "I don't have radiators," I said. He came over that night with coffee and looked around like he expected to find a tiny bell I'd planted. "Okay," he said finally. "Let's go to the burial ground. Right now." It wasn't storming anymore, just a low, drizzly cold. We walked the 10 minutes, cutting past the library. The gates were locked at that hour. We stood at the bars and peered in. The place looked like a black and white photo. In the back near where we'd been, something moved, though it could have been the branches. I recorded for a minute anyway. Nothing. A woman walking a pit mix came by and gave us a look. "You ghost hunters?" she asked. When we smiled and shook our heads, she said, "My uncle used to work inside. He said you hear that bell on storm nights when the storm passes over the river and the city's quiet. He said a rope rotted 100 years ago and someone forgot to tell the bell. He also said the people who hear it usually end up back there when they shouldn't." She tugged the dog along. We went back on Saturday during normal hours. Keen was there again, sweeping puddles off the flagstones. "Let me ask you something," I said. "Do you ever hear—" "No," he said too quickly. "No bells. Not for a long time." "But there was a bell right there," Marcus said, pointing. "Folks like to say so," Keen said. "People like stories. They also like to climb fences at night and break their ankles." "Don't be folks," I told him about hearing a bell in my apartment during the storm. He listened without a word, then looked at the sky. Storm pulls up old things, he said. Tricks the ear. Barometric pressure. My mother always said it made the dead sit up to see what the noise was. She'd talk like that and then send me to bed with the radio on so I wouldn't hear. He didn't kick us out exactly, but his attention made us feel like intruders. We wandered the back path anyway. I found the same iron plate and bent to look closer. The bolts had been cut clean recently, and there were 4 bright scratches across the surface as if something heavy had been dragged and pivoted there. If the bell had been in storage, someone had brought it out and then taken it again. Or I was reading marks that had always been there. The mind does that when it wants to be afraid. On the way out, a tall man in a long coat passed us going in. He nodded, eyes down. The coat looked expensive, wrong for a muddy day. He carried something under the fabric that could have been an umbrella or a tripod. I wish that detail didn't stick with me. I wish I hadn't seen him again. 2 weeks after that, the bell woke me the same way. 3 strikes, 10 seconds apart, then silence until I almost convinced myself I dreamed it. Then 1 more. I recorded again and got 1 clean note. I saved it and, against common sense, set it as the default sound for my phone's timer, because I wanted to prove to myself it was just a sound, not a curse. There are small humiliations we do to fight our own brains. It didn't work. Every time I set a 2-minute timer for pasta, that bell stabbed the apartment and made my shoulders jump. Hannah stayed over one Friday, and I told her about it because she could see something was off. She listens the way good bookstore people do, quiet, silver attention. I played the recording. She didn't smile or call it neat. It sounds like a handbell, she said, but there's no air in it. It's like if you rang a bell underground. We made a rule. If it rang during a storm again, we'd go to the burial ground together, like pressure release, like proof. The storm obliged 3 nights later. It came in with a ferocity that felt performative. Wind slapping the windows hard like someone mad at a door. The lights flickered, stayed on. The bell woke me right before 2. I sat up and looked at the clock and knew I hadn't dreamed it. Hannah heard it too. She gripped my wrist. The next strike felt close enough to touch. We dressed without talking, layered up, and walked fast down the wet block. The city has this hush between 2 and 3 where it feels like a neighborhood paused. The rain had gone to a fine mist that beaded on our coats. My phone light made a fat white cone that seemed to stop 5 feet ahead. The gate at Old Western was chained, but the chain was loose because someone had wrapped it instead of locking it. The wind moved the bars just enough to make that small complaining clank. The sound of metal tired of being metal. Hannah gave me a look that meant, do we really want to do this? And I stepped through first like an idiot to make it so she didn't have to be brave alone. She followed. Inside, the dark was heavier. The stones shoulder to shoulder made alleys, some dead ends, some threads that led to choked corners. Water dripped from the low stone vaults in rhythms that almost became patterns. I pointed my phone toward the back and saw the iron plate, sharp in the beam like a stage prop. My timer bell went off in my pocket because my thumb had apparently brushed the screen without me knowing, and we both jumped hard enough to hurt. Hannah swore. I fumbled to shut it off and said, "That's me, that's me." The air around us felt watchful after that, like the place had decided we'd brought the bell with us. We got to the plate. No bell, no rope, just the stand in the wet. I was about to say something easy and pointless when we heard footsteps on the other side of the stones. Not ours, not echo, a measured tread moving slow. Step, pause, step. I turned the phone light that way and caught a white flash of a face in the long coat before the person raised an arm and covered themselves from the beam. "It's a cemetery," the man said mildly. "Point that down." I lowered the light to his shoes. He wore black dress shoes slick with mud, wrong for this place. He held something that cast a shape I read finally as a small bell dangling from a handle, like a schoolmarm's bell. He wasn't carrying an umbrella or a tripod the other day. He was carrying this. "I don't think you're supposed to be here right now," he added, not unkind like we were kids he'd caught behind the bleachers. "Neither are you," I said, before my more measured side could catch up. "I work with the Historical Society," he said, patting his coat like there'd be a badge there. Someone said the bell had been heard. "I'm taking measurements." "In the middle of the night," Hannah said. She has a voice that turns cold beautifully when she wants. He smiled and it didn't reach his eyes. "Storm's the best time," he said. "You only hear it in storm air. Barometric pressure and imagination." The 2 old composers, he stepped closer. The bell in his hand didn't ring. The way he held it made me think of a person holding a dog that tries to run. He moved past us to the iron stand and set the bell on the plate, centering it carefully, then crouched and did something with the little screws in the base. The hair on my arms lifted the way it does when a surprise is already in the room. But you haven't found it. Hannah took my hand hard. You can't just... I started. Shh, he said gently. Listen, we listened. Rain ticking on leaves, on stone, the distant hiss of a bus, and then, soft as an afterthought, the bell rang. It was the same tone as the recording on my phone, which makes no sense because this was a small handbell on a plate, not a bell connected to a tube down into the ground. It rang once, stopped. 10 seconds. Rang again. 10 seconds. Rang a third time. The man stood and stepped back, satisfied. Do you feel that? He asked, turning to us. In your ears, like your ears want to pop? I did. It felt like a gentle pressure from inside, a balloon inflating behind my sinuses. The bell rang a fourth time, but this one sounded wrong, strangled, caught like the clapper had hit something soft. The man's neat face flickered, quick annoyance, then he looked down at the bell. He didn't touch it. The handle jerked. I swear it jerked like someone had pulled the rope tied to it, except there was no rope. Okay, he said, far too calm now, and reached to lift the bell off the plate. The handle didn't move. He pulled harder. The bell stayed as if something inside the plate had decided to hold it. The bell rang again, faster, a nervous, angry ringing that didn't match the 10-second spacing. The pressure in my ears went to pain. Somewhere deep in the ground under our feet, there was a sound like a fingernail down a slate. Low and deep and wrong, and the bell rang, and then stopped dead. No one moved for a full breath. Then the bell sound came from under the ground where the stand was, not from the bell on the plate. One clear strike, clean as air. The man let go like he'd been shocked. He took 2 steps back. His expensive shoes slid in the mud and he windmilled his arms to keep from falling. The bell on the plate tipped and clattered, lifeless metal. Just a thing. Under the ground in that tight dark, the bell rang again. We ran. I can dress it up, but that's what happened. The 3 of us lost our dignity and we ran for the gate. The man reached it first and squeezed through without looking back. He didn't say goodnight, didn't say anything. He pivoted left and disappeared into the wet streetlight like he'd never been there. We got out and I pulled the chain around the bars the way we found it. Hannah grabbed my jacket and said, "Your phone." And I realized I'd been recording the whole time. It's on my hard drive now. I have the man's voice saying, "Listen." I have the bell on the surface and I have the bell under the ground. The 2 sounds different enough that they feel like 2 speakers even though there was only one. We walked home without talking. I felt like I'd been caught listening at a door and whoever was on the other side had leaned in, ear to ear. Later that morning, when the sky was white like paper, we went back in daylight. The iron plate was there. The bell was not. The only sign that anything had happened was a faint circle etched into the rust where the base had sat, and 4 fresh scratches like marks of some tool, I don't know. We found Keen near the hall office. He looked at us and then at our shoes. "You shouldn't," he said, and didn't finish the sentence. "Who's the guy with the coat?" I asked. "From the Historical Society." Keen frowned. "We work with 2 ladies from the university," he said. "No man in a coat." "Not lately. We saw him twice," Hannah said. "He had a bell." Keen looked at her, then at me, then out at the rows of stones like he might find an answer on one of them. "Some people act like they own the dead because they can carry a clipboard," he said flatly. "I'll keep an eye." That should be where it ends. We were scared. We had a recording. We had a story to tell at bars. We agreed not to go back at night again, but I can't make the end be where I want it to be. About a week later, my phone alarm went off at work. A normal chime I'd changed it to on purpose, and over it faintly came that thin, clear ring. My phone was on my desk, face up, not vibrating. The ring didn't come from it. It came from the air near it or under the wood. I jerked my hand back like it was hot. Jen from the next cubicle leaned over and said, "You all right?" "Yeah," I said. "Timer." I didn't set a timer. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed and played the cemetery recording again. And behind the obvious bell sounds, there was something else I hadn't noticed before because I hadn't wanted to hear it. Between the strikes below the static, you can make out a voice if you tell yourself it's there. It's not words exactly. It's the shape of trying to be words. A breath that never becomes a syllable, a soft effort. If I'm being honest, it sounds like the mouth of a person who has been sleeping too long, trying to decide whether to inhale or exhale. You'll say I'm hearing pattern in noise. I'll agree with you until the sky turns that particular Baltimore gray, and then I won't. Two small things to end with, because I know people on here like details. First, Hannah doesn't like to talk about it anymore. She asked me not to set any alarms when she stays over, and she won't walk past the burial ground if she can avoid it. When the forecast says storms, she sleeps at her place, not mine. We're still together, but there's a distance that wasn't there before, like you get after a small car accident. You're fine, but some part of you learned something scary about breaks in physics and the way the world doesn't have to care. Second, last week I saw the man in the long coat on a bus on North Avenue. He sat in the very back, hands folded. No bell this time. Our eyes met and he smiled without his face. I got off at the next stop because I couldn't stand to sit there while he did. When the bus pulled away, I could see him still looking through the glass. The bus was almost empty, but up near the front, in that little space for the folded stroller, there was something small and dark sitting on the floor like a lost lunchbox. The bus turned and the angle changed, and I realized it was the bell just out in the open. Nobody seemed to notice it. As the bus shifted lanes, it tilted slightly and then came back, not ringing, just waiting. It hasn't stormed yet this week. Tonight the air is that itchy still, that means rain's close. I have the fan on and the window cracked. Somewhere 3 blocks away a bottle fell and rolled and I flinched. If the bell rings again, I'm not going back there. You can tell me it's pressure. You can tell me it's people. You can tell me I wanted to hear it. Maybe I do. But at night in this city, between thunder and the long pause before it, a small old sound hunts its way up from the dark. And when it finds you, it doesn't speak, because it doesn't have to. It just lets itself be heard, 10 seconds at a time until you realize you've started counting along. And when you miss one, when you get to 10 and nothing happens and you feel relief, it rings once more, late and close, as if to remind you that your timing isn't what matters.